Human, this atmosphere would be toxic. But for the creatures here, it was life itself. Beneath the towering plants, the ground is soft and unstable, built from centuries of rotting vegetation. Every step sinks into mud that reeks of decay. The smell of rot is constant, heavy, and inescapable. The forests look wrong. Instead of familiar trees, you find giant club mosses with bark-like scales rising 100 feet or more into the sky. Tree ferns stretch their feathery fronds into canopies so thick that they blot out the sun. Beneath them, the forest feels like a maze, dark, humid, claustrophobic. It is a world alive with growth, yet always on the edge of burning. Because in this atmosphere, a single spark could turn the land into an inferno. You stop and listen. The forest is never silent. Every second carries sound, buzzing, scraping, clicking, wings beating against the air. The noise doesn't fade. It builds, layer upon layer, until it feels like the forest itself is breathing all around you. Then you hear it. A sharp clicking, like claws tapping against bark, followed by a low mechanical hum that vibrates in your chest. Insects here are not small annoyances. They are rulers, and their presence is everywhere. Even the shadows betray you. Look too long into the darkness, and you may catch the twitch of antennae, the shift of legs, or the reflection of compound eyes watching back. The Carboniferous wasn't simply alive. It was suffocating with life. And for any creature that dared to step onto land, that abundance meant terror. Why were these monsters so large? The answer lies in how insects breathe. Like mammals, they don't have lungs. Instead, oxygen passes through tiny tubes called trachea, diffusing directly into their tissues. In today's atmosphere, this system limits them to small sizes, flies, ants, beetles. But in the Carboniferous, with oxygen saturating every breath, those limits disappeared. Arthropods grew into giants, millipedes stretched longer than humans, scorpions swelled to the size of cats, spiders spun webs across entire trees, dragonflies soared on wings wider than hawks. The air itself had turned into a weapon, creating monsters whose very existence feels impossible to us now. For the first amphibians crawling onto land, this wasn't just a new world. It was a battlefield tilted against them. The Carboniferous was a paradox. The land looked lush, green, full of life. But beneath that abundance was danger at every step. Every sound warned of predators. Every breath carried risk, and this was only the beginning. Because while the forests themselves were threatening, what truly made this world a nightmare were the creatures that crawled across the ground, monsters with too many legs, armored bodies, and hunger written into their design. Approached the fear of seeing Arthroplura. It was a reminder that in this world, evolution did not shape creatures to comfort our eyes, but to dominate their environment. To stumble across one of these giants in the half-light of the swamp would have frozen any vertebrate in terror. They did not need to hunt you to command your fear. Their size alone was enough. But Arthroplura was not the only terror sliding through these forests. Scorpions also thrived here, and they were nothing like the small palm-sized hunters we know today. These were giants, some as large as modern cats. Their bodies glistened with armored plates, their pincers snapping with brutal force. Their tails arched overhead like venom-tipped spears. In the Carboniferous gloom, these predators stalked the ground, moving silently. Patient hunters waiting for anything small enough to strike. For the first amphibians venturing onto land, an encounter with one of these giant scorpions could mean instant death. Their stings carried venom, their claws could crush, and their bodies were built for ambush. Imagine pausing in the swamp at dusk, when the air thickened with mist, and seeing movement from the corner of your eye, a glistening shape sliding forward on armored legs, tail raised, claws open. That moment of stillness before the strike would have been more terrifying than the strike itself. And then there were the spiders, not delicate, fragile creatures spinning small webs among branches, but predators large enough to trap and kill small vertebrates. Their webs stretched across entire tree trunks, thick strands of silk glistening with dew, invisible until you walked into them. In the gloom of the Carboniferous forest, where light barely filtered through the canopy, every strand of silk was a hidden snare, and every snare had an owner waiting in the center, fangs twitching, venom ready. To step carelessly was to risk feeling that sudden tug of silk across your arm or face, the invisible warning that something with 8 legs was already moving toward you. Spiders hunted with patience. Some spun enormous webs. Others lurked in burrows beneath the soil, waiting for vibrations to signal prey. Still others prowled openly, crawling across trunks and branches with eerie silence. Wherever you turned, there was no escape from their presence. The claustrophobia of the Carboniferous forest is hard to imagine today. Picture yourself walking through that damp labyrinth, each step sinking slightly into mud, the smell of rot heavy in your lungs. Above you, webs shimmer faintly in the mist. At your feet, scorpions slip silently between roots. Somewhere nearby, the scraping of countless legs grows louder as a giant centipede pushes its armored bulk forward. Every sense is assaulted. The air is thick and wet. The ground shifts beneath you. The shadows seem alive, twitching, crawling, waiting. And the worst part is not the size of these creatures, is their abundance. They were not rare monsters lurking in caves or hidden valleys. They were everywhere, filling every niche, crawling across every surface. To live in this world was to be surrounded on all sides, pressed in by creatures that seemed designed to overwhelm. Unlike the dinosaurs that would come millions of years later, giants that you could at least see from afar, the monsters of the Carboniferous lived close. They were not distant. They were at your feet, above your head, brushing against your skin. They were woven into the fabric of the land itself. Silence did not mean safety. In fact, silence was worse. When the buzzing and scraping stopped, it meant something had shifted. It meant predators were near, watching, waiting. For the earliest vertebrates clumsy on land, every step was a gamble. The swamp was filled with food and opportunity, yes, but it was also alive with traps. To crawl from the water was to enter a nightmare, a labyrinth where every sense screamed danger. This was the true nature of the Carboniferous land. Not a place of growth and promise, but a place of fear. Every inch of soil, every tree trunk, every shadowed corner was claimed by monsters with too many legs, too many eyes, and too much hunger. And though the skies above were no safer, here on the forest floor, terror was intimate. It was close. It was crawling all around you. Love was not background noise. It was the warning of death circling overhead. Imagine walking through the swamp and suddenly feeling a shadow sweep across your path. You glance up just in time to see the flash of translucent wings, the glint of enormous eyes locking onto you. There is no roar, no scream, only the rush of air as the predator dives. To small creatures of that age, there was no defense. To be spotted was to be taken. What made Meganeura so terrifying was not just its size, but its agility. Today, dragonflies are among the most efficient hunters on Earth, catching prey mid-air with almost perfect success rates. Meganeura took that skill and amplified it with size and strength. The oxygen-rich atmosphere gave it stamina we can hardly imagine. It could hover effortlessly, dart forward with explosive speed, and wheel in tight arcs to chase prey through the dense canopy. It was not a clumsy giant. It was a sky lord, a predator honed to perfection. And Meganeura was not alone. The Carboniferous skies teemed with other oversized insects, giant cockroaches with wings like paper fans, adults with armored shells that clattered in flight, and swarms of smaller but still unnervingly large creatures that filled the air with constant motion. The canopy buzzed, droned, and hummed with life. To stand beneath it was to feel surrounded, not only from below, but from above, trapped between crawling horrors and swooping hunters. The psychological weight of this world cannot be overstated. On land, danger was everywhere, but at least you could keep your eyes low, watching for scorpions or webs. In the sky, there was no escape from awareness. Every hum of wings could herald a dive. It was constant surveillance, constant threat. The forest was a cage, and the skies were its bars. What makes this even more haunting is the familiarity. Meganeura was not some alien beast with unfamiliar anatomy. It was a dragonfly, something we know today, but magnified into nightmare proportions. The same design, the same shimmering wings, the same darting flight patterns, but scaled up until they became predators capable of ruling entire ecosystems. That closeness makes the dread sharper. We fear dinosaurs, yes, but they are distant, strange, almost mythic. A giant dragonfly feels immediate, personal, because we still see its miniature descendants buzzing across our ponds. Picture the early amphibians crawling from the water, fragile, clumsy, their limbs still learning to walk. They raise their heads for a breath of heavy oxygen-rich air, only to hear it. That low mechanical buzz overhead. Their eyes flick upward, and the last thing they see is a shadow descending, spiny legs spreading wide. In seconds, they are lifted from the mud, carried into the sky, and devoured. For these pioneers of land, there was no safety above. The sky was not freedom, it was death. And for millions of years, Meganeura ruled this world unchallenged. The forests were its hunting ground. The canopy was its battlefield. The swamp edges were its feeding stations. Nothing small could survive for long without hiding in the water or the shadows. This was the era when insects did not merely exist alongside vertebrates. They dominated them. They dictated where and how other creatures could move. It is almost impossible for us to imagine a world where the air itself was hostile, where flight belonged not to birds or bats but to insects swollen to monstrous scale. Yet, for one chapter in Earth's history, that was the reality. The skies were not open space. They were hunting grounds, filled with buzzing predators that blurred the line between fascination and terror, each breath thick with oxygen-rich air. For a moment, it raises its head, tasting this new world with senses still tuned to water. The canopy above is vast, blotting out the sun, and the air is humid and hot, thick with the smell of decay. To us, this scene might seem like a triumph life conquering land, but for the amphibian, it was a gamble with death, because the ground was not empty, it was already filled with hunters. Giant scorpions stalked the shadows, their pincers snapping and tails arched with venom. Spiders lurked in webs strong enough to trap small vertebrates. Arthropleura slid through the undergrowth like a moving wall. Even above, Meganora circled, scanning for movement. Every inch of the Carboniferous forest was alive with predators. For these first amphibians, every breath and every step carried mortal risk. Their bodies betrayed them too. On land, without water to support them, they were slow. Their limbs splayed awkwardly to the sides. Their skin dried quickly in the oppressive air, forcing them to stay close to swamps and rivers. They could not stray far, and even when they did, they left trails of dampness that predators could follow. Their eggs were soft, jelly-like, and had to be laid in water. Each generation was chained to the swamps, bound by biology to the very element they sought to escape. And yet, despite these limitations, they persisted. Why? Because the rewards were great enough to risk it all. On land, food was plentiful. Insects and other small arthropods crawled in abundance. And the first amphibians discovered that they could feed on them with relative ease when they avoided the larger predators. In those brief windows of safety, hidden beneath a rotting log or nestled among the roots of a giant fern, they found nourishment and shelter. Each success, no matter how small, was a step toward survival. But survival was always tenuous. Picture a small amphibian resting on the edge of a swamp at night. Its body glistens in the moonlight, skin moist from the water. Around it, the forest vibrates with sound, the hum of dragonfly wings above, the scraping of countless legs across bark and soil, the clicking of pincers in the dark. Suddenly, silence falls. The noises stop, and in that stillness, a shadow stirs. From beneath the leaves, a giant scorpion emerges, its body gleaming black, its pincers stretching wide. The amphibian freezes. It cannot outrun. Its body is too slow, its limbs too clumsy. The scorpion strikes, and the fragile pioneer becomes another meal in the endless cycle of survival. Stories like this were repeated countless times. The mortality rate for amphibians must have been staggering, yet nature's patient. With each generation, those who survived passed on subtle advantages. Stronger limbs, better lungs, slightly thicker skin. The smallest changes compounded, and slowly the amphibians adapted. They were fragile, yes, but they were also persistent. Evolution had chosen them as the first vertebrates to gamble on land, and despite the terror that surrounded them, they endured. Their story is haunting because they were not rulers. They were not apex predators. They were prey soft-bodied, slow, and unremarkable compared to the armored arthropods. And yet, they represent one of the most important turning points in Earth's history. Without these fragile pioneers, vertebrates would never have conquered the land. Dinosaurs, mammals, and eventually humans all owe their existence to these first clumsy steps out of the water. But in their own time, their reality was bleak. Each venture onto land was a roll of the dice. The forest floor was a battlefield stacked against them. Had no claws, no armor, no venom, no wings. Only persistence. Only the stubborn drive to push into a world that seemed determined to reject them. And so, their lives were spent in constant tension, half in water, half on land. They never fully left the swamps behind. The water was still their sanctuary. In it they moved gracefully, their bodies supported, their gills and lungs both working to keep them alive. In the water, They could escape the scorpions and centipedes. In the water, Meganeura's wings could not follow. In the water, there was at least a chance at peace. But survival depended on risk. Again and again, they returned to the land, hunting, breeding, seeking opportunity. Each time, they gambled their lives against a world that did not welcome them. And though many fell, enough survived to keep the gamble alive. The image is sobering. We like to imagine evolution as a story of triumphs, of progress and victory. But for these first amphibians, it was a story of fear, of fragility, of survival against overwhelming odds. They were not heroes in their own age. They were shadows, crawling timidly onto land, darting back into the water at the first sign of danger. And yet, through their fear and fragility, they paved the way for everything that would follow. The Carboniferous forests may have been filled with monsters, but they also bore witness to the courage of the small and the vulnerable. The amphibians remind us that sometimes the most important revolutions in life's history do not come from dominance, but from persistence. From the quiet, fragile insistence on stepping forward, even when the world seems to push back, skyward for centuries, become torches. The heat intensifies beyond comprehension. It is not a fire as we know it today, but an inferno fueled by an atmosphere designed to burn. Even damp wood, even half-rotted vegetation catches fire. The swamp itself ignites. The roar is deafening. Walls of flame consume entire forests in minutes. Animals scatter in desperation. Giant scorpions scuttle across the ground, their armored bodies glinting red in the firelight. Spiders abandon their massive webs, skittering blindly as their silk curls and melts. Meganeura, those lords of the sky, beat their wings furiously, rising above the flames only to fall back, their bodies overwhelmed by heat. Even Arthropleura, the armored titan of the undergrowth, is helpless. Its long body twists and thrashes, trapped as flames sweep across the ground. It cannot escape. And the amphibians? For them, the water becomes their only salvation. Dive into rivers and swamps, burying themselves in mud or sinking to the depths, waiting desperately as flaming debris rains down on the surface. For countless others, there is no escape. The fire devours everything in its path. We know these infernos were not rare. Fossilized charcoal found in Carboniferous rocks reveals that fires swept across the planet again and again. They were not accidents, but rhythms of the age. Entire forests would burn, reducing landscapes to ash. Yet in time, the endless humidity and rainfall of the swamps would give birth to new growth. The cycle, repeated fire, destruction, renewal. The forests regrew, only to burn again. It is hard for us to imagine the scale of these fires. Today, with oxygen at 21%, wildfires devastate vast regions. In the Carboniferous, with nearly half again as much oxygen saturating the atmosphere, fires burned hotter, longer, and faster than anything we know. They could consume entire ecosystems, turning lush green jungles into smoking wastelands in days. The very air itself was complicit, carrying flames like a weapon forged by the planet. For the creatures of this world, fire was an omnipresent threat. It did not stalk like a predator, but its reach was greater, its destruction absolute. To live in the Carboniferous was to live with the knowledge that survival could be erased in an instant by storms beyond your control. The scorpion might be avoided, the spider escaped, the dragonfly evaded, but fire consumed all. And yet fire was not only destruction, it was also creation. Each inferno cleared the forests, making way for new growth. Plants evolved thicker bark, spores that could spread after fire, and strategies to endure the cycle of burning and regrowth. Charcoal, left behind in ancient soils, locked away carbon and reshaped the atmosphere over millions of years. Fire was both terror and balance, an elemental force that shaped life as profoundly as any predator. But for those who lived through it, fire was terror. Picture yourself standing at the edge of a swamp as the sky splits open with lightning. A second later, the horizon erupts. Heat slams into your body, smoke fills your lungs, and the world around you transforms into a furnace. You stumble into the water as flames sweep through the forest, the hiss of steam rising as burning branches crash into the swamp. The air is unbreathable, the sky glows red. The ground trembles with the collapse of trees. And above it all, the roar of fire drowns out every other sound. In that moment, survival is not a question of strength or speed. It is a question of luck. This was the paradox of the Carboniferous world. It was lush, green, overflowing with life, yet all of it was fragile, balanced on the edge of destruction. Oxygen gave life its monstrous scale, but oxygen also made the world burn. The very gift that created giants also fueled the infernos that could erase them. For the amphibians, fire was both curse and blessing. It killed many, but it also reshaped their world, creating new habitats as forests regrew, leaving behind open ground where they could creep forward. Fire and its destruction carved paths for evolution. It was another trial in the endless arms race of survival, and in the shadows of these firestorms, something remarkable was happening. While amphibians clung to life in the swamps, another kind of creature was emerging. A creature with tougher skin, stronger lungs, and eggs that no longer depended on water. The reptiles. And they would take the gamble of land to an entirely new level. Tiny fortresses of survival. With them, reptiles broke the last chain tying vertebrates to the water. It is hard to overstate how extraordinary this was. For the first time in Earth's history, animals could lay their young on dry land without fear. They could nest beneath logs, in cracks, or under leaves. They could spread into new territories untouched by amphibians. Every egg was a declaration that the land itself could now be conquered. At first, reptiles were small players in a world still dominated by arthropods. Dragonflies still patrolled the skies, giant millipedes still scraped across the forest floor, and scorpions as large as cats still hunted in the shadows. To these giants, the first reptiles must have seemed insignificant, but their adaptations gave them an advantage the arthropods could never match. Reptiles had skeletons inside their bodies, strong frameworks that allowed them to grow larger, without being limited by the way oxygen diffused through tubes. Unlike insects, their size was not shackled by the atmosphere. As oxygen levels shifted, the arthropods would falter, but reptiles could endure. They were not bound to one airway, they were built for change. Their jaws, lined with sharp teeth, gave them weapons amphibians lacked. Their claws, their quick reflexes, their stronger limbs all made them predators in their own right. They hunted smaller insects, feasted on amphibians, and crept into niches that had never before been touched by vertebrates. Slowly, quietly, they began to rise. Picture the scene. In the aftermath of a forest fire, the ground is charred and silent. Ash drifts through the air. The towering ferns are reduced to blackened stumps. From the rubble, a small reptile emerges. Its scales glint faintly in the dim light. It pauses, tasting the air with a flick of its tongue, before scuttling across the cracked soil in search of food. Around it, the world is still dangerous. Giant dragonflies buzz overhead, and in the shadows a scorpion stirs. Yet this little creature carries an advantage the monsters around it do not. It is not chained to the swamp, can go where the giants cannot follow. This shift was not dramatic, did not happen in a single generation. For millions of years, reptiles remained in the background, their populations small, their bodies modest. But every step they took across dry soil, every egg laid beyond the reach of the water, was a step toward the future. The arthropods, for all their size and power, were creatures of the moment. They had thrived in the oxygen-rich paradise of the Carboniferous, but their reign depended on conditions that could not last. The reptiles were different. They were survivors, innovators, and were not just adapted to the present. They were prepared for what was to come, and in time, the balance began to shift. Oxygen levels would fall, the towering forests would wither, the firestorms would grow worse. The world that had given birth to giants would collapse. The arthropods would shrink and vanish. But the reptiles would endure. They would spread into the spaces left behind, filling the vacuum with teeth, claws, and determination. The first reptiles were not yet dinosaurs. They were small, lizard-like creatures hugging the ground, darting between roots and rocks, yet within their fragile bodies lay the blueprints of titans. Their descendants would one day grow into crocodiles, snakes, birds, and yes, dinosaurs. They were the first vertebrates to claim land not as a temporary refuge, but as a permanent home. In the silence after the fire, in the shadows of giants, the reptiles took their first steps toward ruling the earth. It was a quiet revolution, almost invisible at first, but unstoppable. For millions of years, arthropods had owned the land, but their time was running out. And in their place, the reptiles would rise, carrying with them the seeds of a new age, the age of vertebrates. Climate patterns wavered, and the lush forests began to falter. As the swamps collapsed, so too did the oxygen they had once released. From 35%, levels declined closer and closer to modern values. For most animals, this shift was survivable. For the arthropods, it was catastrophic. Unlike vertebrates with lungs, insects breathe through a network of narrow tube trachea that allow oxygen to diffuse directly into their tissues. The system works beautifully for small creatures, but it fails as bodies grow large. In the Carboniferous, with oxygen saturating the air, those tubes could feed even the tissues buried deep inside a giant insect's body. But as oxygen levels fell, the balance broke. A dragonfly like Meganeura, with a 3-foot wingspan, could no longer draw enough oxygen to keep its muscles working. Its flight became weaker, clumsier, impossible to sustain. The giant scorpions could no longer feed their tissues with each breath. Their size became a liability. The massive millipedes, once armored titans of the forest floor, simply could not pump enough oxygen to their organs. What had been their greatest strength there, size suddenly became their death sentence. One by one, the giants disappeared. The skies fell silent as the deep mechanical buzz of giant wings faded. The forest floors grew still as the scraping of countless armored legs diminished. What had once been a world of overwhelming presence became quieter, emptier, less menacing. But the collapse was not just about atmosphere. Climate shifts compounded the crisis. As the great swamp forests declined, fires grew worse. Without the endless dampness, flames burned hotter and longer, devouring what little greenery remained. Habitat shrank, food chains broke, and the delicate balance that had allowed arthropods to dominate was shattered. For the amphibians, too, this was disaster. Their watery homes shriveled, and many species vanished. Yet for the reptiles, the moment was an opportunity. With their scaly armor and their hard-shelled eggs, they could survive in the new drier world. They did not need vast swamps. They did not need constant moisture. They could endure what others could not. It is in this crucible of collapse that the future began to take shape. For millions of years, insects had been the apex predators of land, a concept almost impossible to imagine today. But their empire was fragile, depended on a single factor, oxygen, and when that factor slipped, their rule crumbled. Imagine walking through the forests at the end of this collapse. The canopy, once thick with towering club mosses, is thinning. Gaps open where trees have died, sunlight filters down more harshly, and the ground is littered with dry, brittle plants instead of damp mats of rot. Fires leave black scars across the land. And the monsters, those crawling terrors, are fewer. A dragonfly still buzzes, but its wingspan is no longer 3 feet, only a fraction of what it once was. A scorpion scuttles in the shadows, but it is small enough to be held in your hand. The nightmare is fading, shrinking before your eyes. The fall of the giants marked more than the end of an age. It was the opening of a door. With arthropods diminished, the path was clear for reptiles to rise. Their lungs, their scales, their egg soul were perfectly suited to the world that was forming. Where the giants faltered, the reptiles advanced. Where forests fell, they found new habitats. Where oxygen dwindled, they thrived. The irony is sharp. The insects had ruled when the air was rich, when abundance seemed endless. The reptiles would rule in scarcity, enduring the harsher world that followed. The collapse of one empire became the foundation of another. And yet, even as the giants faded, their legacy did not vanish entirely. Their smaller descendants survived, the dragonflies that still skim over ponds, the scorpions that still patrol deserts, the centipedes that still curl beneath rotting logs. They are shadows of what once was, reminders that for a time the earth bred monsters so strange, so overwhelming that even dinosaurs seem almost familiar by comparison. The decline of the giants was not a sudden apocalypse, but a drawn-out unraveling. Step by step, fire by fire, storm by storm, the atmosphere shifted, the forests died, and the titans shrank into memory. And as they faded, the stage was set for something new. The Carboniferous was closing. The next act was about to begin. The world was heading toward another upheaval, one that would make even this collapse seem small. The end of the Carboniferous was not the true end. That lay ahead in an extinction so vast, so devastating, that it would erase almost everything. The great dying, the Permian catastrophe, was waiting just beyond the horizon, as if something extraordinary. Their bodies were tougher, their lungs stronger, their teeth sharper, as slowly lineages began to diverge. Some grew into herbivores, their jaws flattening to grind the tough vegetation of the drier land. Others evolved into hunters, their bodies lean and fast, their jaws lined with teeth made for piercing flesh. The arms race that had once belonged to insects was now being rewritten by reptiles. With each passing million years, the balance of power shifted. No longer did the skies thrum with giant wings. No longer did the undergrowth quake with armored millipedes. Instead, the land echoed with the footsteps of reptiles. They were no longer fragile newcomers, but the architects of the future. The age of the arthropods was gone. The age of reptiles had begun. And yet this was not a stable age. The earth itself was restless. Deep beneath the surface, tectonic plates moved with relentless force, colliding continents together. By the middle of the Permian, the world's landmasses had fused into a single colossal supercontinent, Pangaea. From horizon to horizon, land stretched almost without interruption. A vast expanse, larger than anything Earth had carried before. Pangaea reshaped everything. Its sheer size meant that much of its interior was cut off from the moderating effects of the sea. Climates swung to extremes. Summers blistered with heat. Winters plunged into bitter cold. The interior of the continent became harsh and unforgiving, an environment that tested every creature that lived there. Rain became scarce far from the coasts, and deserts sprawled across thousands of miles. For life, this was both opportunity and danger. Reptiles thrived in these drier climates, diversifying into countless forms. Some evolved into lumbering herbivores with barrel-like bodies that could ferment tough plants in their guts. Others became sleek predators, their jaws snapping with precision. Amphibians, meanwhile, clung to the edges confined to lakes, rivers, and coastal wetlands, their reign fading into memory. The oceans, too, began to change. With continents colliding, coastlines shifted and seas grew shallower. Coral reefs flourished in some regions, while other areas became stagnant and hostile. The world seemed alive with transformation, as though every part of Earth was reshaping itself into something unfamiliar. But behind this restless energy lay shadows. The Permian world was setting the stage for a catastrophe unlike anything before or since. Volcanic eruptions rumbled beneath the land. Carbon dioxide levels began to climb. Oceans grew warmer and less hospitable. What had once been a vibrant transition was tilting toward disaster. Still, for millions of years, life flourished in the cracks between extremes. Reptiles continued their rise, some evolving into forms that hinted at the future dinosaurs to come. Mammal-like reptiles appeared as well, strange creatures with sprawling limbs and sharp teeth that would eventually give rise to true mammals. It was a time of experimentation, a time when evolution tested new designs. Imagine walking through a Permian plain. The land is dry, the air hot, the ground cracked beneath your feet. Herds of bulky herbivores graze on sparse vegetation, their armored hides gleaming in the sun. Nearby, predators lurk sleek, muscular reptiles with jaws ready to strike. The air is no longer thick with buzzing wings, no longer heavy with damp decay. It is dry, sharp, unforgiving. This is a new world, but not yet a safe one. The Permian was a crucible. It forged the reptiles that would one day become dinosaurs. It tested the endurance of amphibians, stripping them from dominance. It reshaped the oceans, the land, and the skies. But above all, it was building toward a breaking point. The decline of the Carboniferous giants had been a warning. The Permian would deliver the blow. So the story turns darker still. For even as life expanded into new forms, the earth was preparing to sweep much of it away. A catastrophe was approaching, a collapse so complete that it would erase more than 90% of all species, leaving behind a world scarred, silent, and almost empty. The Great Dying was near, standing on Permian soil as this disaster unfolded. The sky glows red with ash and haze, dimming the sun into a perpetual twilight. The air tastes metallic, heavy with gases that choke the lungs. Forests wither as heat intensifies. Rivers dry into dust. On the coasts, the seas no longer sparkle blue, but swirl with a strange dark green, poisoned by algal blooms fed by the nutrient runoff of collapsing ecosystems. Fish float belly up in their thousands. Coral reefs, once vibrant, dissolve into lifeless rubble. For creatures on land, survival became nearly impossible. The reptiles that had spread across Pangaea faced starvation as plants died out. Herbivores collapsed first, their massive bodies unable to find enough food. With their prey gone, predators soon followed. The mammal-like reptiles that had once thrived dwindled, their bones left scattered across a barren earth. The oceans fared no better. As global temperatures rose, the seas lost oxygen, creating vast dead zones where no fish, no shellfish, not even microscopic plankton could survive. Methane bubbling from the ocean floor added to the suffocating mix. Entire marine food, web sharks, bony fish, trilobites, that had endured since the Cambrian crumbled into silence. The collapse was not swift like an asteroid strike. It was drawn out, wave after wave of disaster. Each eruption, each climatic lurch, each pulse of carbon released hammered life further into decline. For hundreds of thousands of years, Earth seemed locked in a death spiral. Species clung desperately to existence, but with every passing millennium, more vanished forever. And then, at last, the world was quiet. The buzzing forests of the Carboniferous were long gone. The sprawling reptilian plains of the Permian were empty. The oceans, once filled with motion, lay eerily still. Nearly everything had perished. It is difficult for us to comprehend the scale of this extinction. The dinosaurs' end, caused by a falling asteroid, is famous, but compared to the Permian extinction, even that cataclysm seems small. The Great Dying did not just prune the tree of life, it nearly cut it down entirely. Yet somehow, life endured. A few hardy species, small and resilient, survived the inferno. Burrowers hiding beneath the soil, creatures that could tolerate heat, drought, and scarcity. In the seas, a handful of fish and invertebrates adapted to the toxic waters. These survivors became the seeds for what would come next. Out of devastation, evolution found a way forward. But the earth left scars. Fossil beds from this time are strange and haunting, sudden breaks where rich ecosystems vanish, leaving behind only barren layers of rock. No forests, no reefs, no diversity. Just silence, captured in stone. For millions of years after the Great Dying, Earth seemed subdued, empty of complexity. But slowly, cautiously, life began to rebuild. Reptiles returned, some evolving into new and unfamiliar shapes. Plants spread again across the continents. Oceans found balance, though never quite as they had been before. And in this slow recovery, the stage was set for the next chapter, the rise of the dinosaurs. Without the Great Dying, the reptiles that would become dinosaurs might never have claimed dominance. Their reign was written in the ashes of the Permian.
Ow.
The lesson of the Great Dying is sobering. Earth is not fragile, but it is not stable either. Its atmosphere, its oceans, its very crust can change in ways that reshape everything. Life adapts. Yes, but only if it can survive the storm. More often than not, survival is a matter of luck, resilience, and timing. The Permian reminds us that extinction is not the exception, but the rule. Every age of Earth has its monsters, its rulers, its empires of life. Every age eventually falls. And to glide through the seas, sleek and fast, filling the gaps left by extinct predators. The oceans were reinventing themselves, step by step. On land, the therapsids, the so-called mammal-like reptiles, struggled. Once dominant, they had been shattered by the Great Dying. Only a few lineages clung to survival. Their numbers reduced and their dominance gone. Among them were the ancestors of mammals, small and shrewd, would wait patiently in the shadows for tens of millions of years before seizing their chance. The new rulers, however, would be the archosaurs. This group of reptiles, tough-skinned and sharp-toothed, began to spread in the chaotic aftermath. They were diverse, ranging from crocodile-like hunters that lurked in rivers to agile land predators that sprinted on strong hind legs. It was within the archosaurs that the earliest dinosaurs first appeared. At first, these early dinosaurs were small and unimpressive compared to what would come later. Imagine a creature the size of a dog or turkey, running lightly across the hot plains of the Triassic. They were not yet the towering giants of later eras, but they carried advantages. Lightweight skeletons, efficient lungs, and swift, agile bodies that allowed them to outcompete slower reptiles. In a land still scarred by extinction, speed and adaptability were everything. The Earth itself was still unstable. Volcanic activity persisted. Temperatures swung between extremes. Rain fell in strange rhythms, sometimes drowning landscapes, sometimes abandoning them to drought. But these very challenges shaped evolution, forcing species to adapt quickly or disappear. The archosaurs, with their resilience, thrived. Plants, too, staged a comeback. With forests destroyed, the land at first was bare and eroded. But slowly, new vegetation spread, conifers, cycads, and ginkgo-like trees that could withstand the harsher climates. These hardy plants became the foundation for rebuilding ecosystems, providing food for herbivores, and restoring balance to the air.
Ow.
The recovery was not instant. It took millions of years for life to truly rebound. For long stretches, Earth seemed like a desert world, sparsely populated and eerily quiet compared to the teeming Carboniferous or Permian. But nature is patient. Each generation carved out a little more stability, until eventually ecosystems blossomed again. And as they did, dinosaurs began to rise. Their numbers grew. Their diversity expanded. From small, two-legged hunters, they evolved into larger predators, swift herbivores, and armored giants. What had begun as fragile survivors transformed into rulers of entire continents. By the Middle Triassic, their dominance was undeniable. The Great Dying had cleared the stage. The giants of the past, the massive arthropods of the Carboniferous, the mighty therapsids of the Permian, were gone. In their absence, dinosaurs inherited the Earth. Their reign would last for more than 150 million years, longer than mammals, longer even than flowering plants. But in these early days, as the Triassic dawned, the world still felt raw and strange. Forests were thin, or oceans were quiet. Skies hung heavy with haze. It was a world rebuilding itself, scar by scar, and the dinosaurs were its new pioneers. The lesson of this age is that survival does not always belong to the strongest. The great predators of the Permian had fallen, while small, flexible creatures endured. From them, entire new empires arose. Extinction is not only an end. It is a beginning, a reshuffling of the deck that allows unexpected players to take the throne. The aftermath of the Great Dying reminds us that life's story is not a straight line. It is a series of collapses and recoveries, of endings that make way for new beginnings. And in the quiet, fragile dawn after Earth's worst extinction, the first chapters of the dinosaurs were written. Soon, they would grow larger. Soon, they would conquer every niche in land, in the air, even in the seas. The Triassic was only the prologue. The true age of dinosaurs was about to begin, with air sacs that allowed for efficient breathing even in hot, thin, or unstable atmospheres. This gave them stamina. Where other reptiles tired quickly in the heat of the Triassic, dinosaurs could run longer, hunt further, and survive in climates that crushed their rivals. The Triassic world was harsh. Vast deserts stretched across the supercontinent of Pangaea, where seasonal monsoons alternated with blistering droughts. Vegetation was sparse, mostly hardy conifers, ginkgos, and cycads that could withstand the extremes. Herds of herbivores had little to eat, and predators fought desperately for scraps of prey. In such a world, resilience and adaptability were everything. And dinosaurs had both. Still, they were not yet unchallenged. Other archosaurs shared their world-massive crocodile-like hunters called Rusokians, armored herbivores, and predatory reptiles with jaws strong enough to crush bone. For tens of millions of years, dinosaurs lived in their shadow, competing for resources but not dominating outright. The Triassic was a testing ground, a crucible in which the strengths of different lineages clashed. Then came another turning point. Around 201 million years ago, the Earth shook again with a wave of volcanic activity. The Triassic-Jurassic extinction events swept away many of the dominant reptile groups that had challenged dinosaurs. Rhesuchians, large amphibians, and other powerful Triassic predators vanished. The stage was cleared once more. But this time, it was the dinosaurs who endured. Why did they survive when others fell? Scientists believe their lightweight skeletons, efficient lungs, and warm-blooded metabolisms gave them an edge in surviving the volatile climates and rapid shifts. Where heavy, sluggish reptiles collapsed, dinosaurs persisted. And when the dust settled, they inherited the Earth. From that moment, their rise was unstoppable. Herbivorous dinosaurs grew larger, adapting to feed on tough conifer leaves and cycads. Predatory species evolved sharper claws, quicker reflexes, and stronger bites, seizing niches left open by vanished rivals. What had begun as small, nimble creatures soon diversified into forms that could dominate every ecosystem. The rise of dinosaurs was not just about size. It was about versatility. They spread across Pangaea, inhabiting deserts, forests, river valleys, and coastlines. Wherever there was food, water, and shelter, dinosaurs carved out a place. They became the prey, the predators, and the keystone species that shaped the ecosystems of the Triassic. Imagine a Triassic floodplain after a storm. Small herds of early plant-eating dinosaurs picked through conifer branches, their sharp teeth stripping leaves. The distance, a predator stalks perhaps Coelophysis, slender and fast, hunting in coordinated groups. Across the plain, smaller reptiles scurry for safety. Amphibians cling to shrinking pools, and crocodile-like archosaurs lurk in rivers. It is a world still in transition, but the balance has already shifted. dinosaurs are no longer just participants. They are competitors too successful to ignore. And as the Triassic drew to its close, they stood ready. The stage had been cleared twice. Now, once by the Great Dying, and again by the Triassic-Jurassic extinction. Each time, the survivors inherited a changed world. This time, the winners were dinosaurs. They'd endured fire, famine, drought, and shifting skies. And in the coming Jurassic, they would ascend from survivors to sovereigns. The rise of the dinosaurs is more than just the story of a group of reptiles. It is a lesson in how resilience and hidden advantages can transform obscurity into dominance. The mighty rulers of the Triassic were not the biggest, nor the most fearsome at first glance. They were the ones best suited to survive change. And in Earth's history, survival through change has always been the key to power. Soon they would no longer be small hunters darting through deserts. Soon they would tower as giants, reshape entire landscapes, and define an age. The Triassic had given them their chance. The Jurassic would crown them kings. To live in the Carboniferous was to exist inside a constant wall of sound. The land itself never slept. The air trembled with the heavy buzz of wings, deep and mechanical, as dragonflies the size of hawks patrolled the skies above. Their wing beats were not soft hums, but thundering vibrations that carried across the swamps like the grinding of saw blades. Beneath your feet the earth scraped and shifted. Giant millipedes dragged their armored bodies across the forest floor. Dozens of legs rasping against bark and stone in an endless rhythm. Each sound was a reminder that the ground itself was alive, pulsing with creatures too large, too numerous, too close. From the shadows came sharper notes, the snap of scorpion pincers, the tear of beetles chewing through fern leaves, the faint crackle of webs trembling as unseen spiders tested their snares. It was a symphony of menace, layered and relentless, leaving no silence, no space for peace. And in this world, silence was the most terrifying sound of all. For when the chorus stopped, when the buzzing faded and the scraping ceased, it meant something larger was moving. Predators had stilled the forest, and all life paused in fear of what came next. The Carboniferous was not only a nightmare of sight and scale, but of sound. Every vibration, every echo, every sudden hush carried the weight of survival. The forest itself was a living orchestra of fear, and every creature that dared to breathe its air was part of its music. It allowed them to breathe efficiently, circulating oxygen through their enormous bodies. Their long necks gave them access to food that smaller creatures could not reach, while their sheer bulk deterred all but the most determined predators. They were not merely animals, they were ecosystems unto themselves, moving fortresses of flesh that reshaped the very landscapes they fed upon. Yet where there are giants, there are hunters. The Jurassic also saw the rise of theropods, the fearsome editors who would one day culminate in the tyrants of the Cretaceous. Early giants like Allosaurus stalked the herds. With sharp, serrated teeth and powerful hind legs, they hunted with speed and precision. At over 30 feet long, Allosaurus was no match for the biggest sauropods alone, but in groups they could bring down even massive prey. Fossil evidence suggests coordinated attacks, packs of predators testing herds, striking the young, the weak, or the isolated. But the Jurassic ecosystem was not just a contest between herbivores and carnivores. It was a symphony of diversity. Smaller ornithopodids like Camptosaurus grazed in the undergrowth, while armored dinosaurs such as Stegosaurus with its plates and spiked tail defended themselves against predators. Forests of conifers stretched across continents, rivers teemed with crocodile-like reptiles, and insects buzzed across the skies, feeding on pollen and spreading the seeds of new plants. Above it all, another revolution was unfolding, the conquest of the air. From the Triassic lineage of pterosaurs, the Jurassic skies now belong to true aerial masters, with wingspans ranging from a few feet to over 20 feet. Creatures like Ramphorhynchus and Pterodactylus soared over coastlines and rivers, their long jaws snapping up fish in daring dives. They were the first vertebrates to truly master flight, ruling the skies millions of years before birds. Their presence made the Jurassic world feel even more alive a planet, where every dimension, from forest floor to open sky, pulsed with giant life. The Earth itself played a role in this flourishing. The breakup of Pangaea created humid coastal zones, fertile valleys, and inland seas that supported lush vegetation. Where the Carboniferous had been dark swamps and the Triassic harsh deserts, the Jurassic was a green paradise. Rainfall nourished vast forests, and oxygen levels stabilized. It was as though the planet had prepared a stage perfectly tailored for the expansion of dinosaur life. Imagine walking into a Jurassic valley at dawn. Mist clings to the conifers, their towering trunks stretching upward into the golden light. From the fog emerged the silhouettes of sauropods, their necks rising like cranes as they strip leaves from branches high above. The distance. The ground quivers as a herd moves together, the sound of their calls echoing like low thunder across the landscape. Suddenly, a shadow darts between Trezon, Allosaurus, stalking, its eyes locked onto a straggler at the herd's edge. Overhead, the sky darkens as a pterosaur glides effortlessly, its wings slicing through the morning air. Every corner of this world is filled with giants, predators, and pioneers. It is a land alive with majesty and menace. What made this age so extraordinary was not simply the size of its creatures, but their diversity. Dinosaurs were no longer survivors fighting for scraps. They were architects of ecosystems. Sauropods shaped forests through their grazing, clearing paths and spreading seeds. Predators kept herds strong by culling the weak. Even smaller species carved out niches, ensuring balance in this vast, interconnected web. Life was flourishing at scales Earth had never seen before. And yet beneath this grandeur, danger still lingered. The Jurassic world was volatile, its continents still shifting, its climate still changing. Volcanoes occasionally darkened skies, earthquakes reshaped valleys, and predators never ceased their hunt. But through it all, dinosaurs thrived. Their resilience, versatility, and sheer dominance allowed them to expand into every corner of the globe. The Jurassic was their golden age. It was the time when they ascended from survivors of catastrophe to masters of the earth. For the next 135 million years, they would rule the land with a grip so strong that no rival could dislodge them until another catastrophe, far in the future, would finally end their reign. For now, though, the Jurassic belonged to them. The land shook with the steps of sauropods. The forests echoed with the roars of predators. The skies shimmered with the wings of pterosaurs. It was a world that pushed life to its most majestic and terrifying extremes, a stage set for the age of giants to reign supreme. Mammals and insect predators, not of giants, but of the overlooked. Fossil evidence suggests it may have used quick bursts of speed and sharp teeth to grab prey before vanishing back into cover. Then there was Dryosaurus, another fleet-footed herbivore, perhaps one of the fastest dinosaurs of its time. With long hind legs and a lightweight body, it relied entirely on speed to survive in a world filled with predators. If Allosaurus was the lion of its age, then Dryosaurus was the gazelle, always alert, always ready to flee. These small and mid-sized dinosaurs remind us that ecosystems were not only about size, but balance. They fed predators, spread seeds, and kept plant life in check, sustaining the larger web of life that surrounded them. Early mammals in the shadows, perhaps the most surprising residents of the Jurassic, were not dinosaurs at all, but the first true mammals. Long before the rise of humans, tiny creatures like Morganucodon and Megasostrodon scurried underfoot, no bigger than mice. At first glance, they may seem insignificant. Their lives were lived in the margins, nocturnal hunters of insects, hiding in burrows and crevices to avoid becoming prey themselves. But their significance lies not in what they were, but in what they would one day become. These small mammals already showed key adaptations: warm-blooded metabolisms, fur for insulation, sharper teeth for chewing varied foods, and more complex brains than many of their reptilian contemporaries.
Ow.
They were learning how to survive by exploiting the hours of darkness. When the thunder of dinosaurs faded and the world belonged to the small and the quick, it is humbling to imagine that while sauropods shook the ground and Allosaurus hunted in packs, the ancestors of all modern mammals, including us, were watching from the shadows, biding their time. Their survival depended not on strength, but on stealth and resilience. Amphibians and reptilian relatives, the Jurassic was also home to large amphibians that lingered near lakes and swamps. Some, like Beelzebufo's distant ancestors, were oversized frogs that lurked at the edges of water, snapping at anything small enough to fit into their mouths. Early crocodilian relatives patrolled rivers, their bodies already showing the durability that would carry them through multiple mass extinctions. These creatures filled critical roles in aquatic ecosystems, while giant reptiles ruled the land and air, and fish and marine reptiles dominated the seas. Amphibians and early crocodilomorphs occupied the boundary zones, rivers, lakes, and wetlands that tied the ecosystems together. Insects and the ancient sky, the air of the Jurassic, was alive with movement, not just from pterosaurs, but from swarms of insects. Dragonflies, beetles, and early relatives of modern flies filled the skies and undergrowth. Their buzzing may seem insignificant compared to the roar of a predator, but insects were the backbone of ecosystems. They pollinated plants, recycled waste, and provided endless food for small reptiles, birds, and mammals. One of the most fascinating developments of the Jurassic was the rise of early true flies and beetles that fed on rotting plant matter. They played a role in breaking down the lush vegetation that covered the planet, ensuring that nutrients cycled back into the soil. Without them, the forest could not have supported the giants above. The web of survival, what makes the smaller life of the Jurassic so compelling, is how it reveals the complexity of survival. Giants ruled in plain sight, but the true resilience of life often came from the small and overlooked. Imagine walking through a Jurassic forest at night. The thunder of sauropods has faded into the distance. The air is cooler, filled with the chirps and rustles of hidden creatures. A Morganucodon emerges cautiously from its burrow, whiskers twitching as it hunts for beetles among the leaf litter. Overhead, a small ornitholesce stalks quietly, searching for the same prey. In the background, the croak of an amphibian rumbles through the darkness. This is not the world of giants, but of survivors, each one carving out an existence in the spaces left behind. Without these smaller creatures, the great dinosaurs themselves could not have thrived. Herbivores relied on the balance of plant life insects helped maintain. Predators relied on populations of small prey to sustain themselves. When larger kills were scarce, the overlooked world was the foundation upon which the giants stood. Legacy of the small. In hindsight, it is almost poetic. The giants of the Jurassic would one day vanish, leaving behind only bones and legends. But the small mammals, the insects, and the unassuming reptiles endured. They carried their lineages forward through extinctions, reshaping themselves as the earth changed. The lesson is simple but profound. Survival does not always belong to the strongest or the largest. Often it belongs to the adaptable, the hidden, the overlooked. The Jurassic was their testing ground. Their success ensured that long after the giants had fallen, their descendants would inherit the earth. So while we stand in awe of the towering sauropods and fearsome allosaurs, we must also look closer beneath the ferns, within the burrows, in the soft rustle of the undergrowth. For in those quiet places, history's most enduring survivors were waiting. Patient and persistent, shaping the distant future we now call the present, with powerful tails that propelled them through the water at astonishing speeds. Some species reached lengths of over 10 meters, gliding effortlessly through the oceans. Ichthyosaurs had enormous eyes, some of the largest relative to body size of any animal in Earth's history. This adaptation allowed them to hunt in the dim light of deeper waters, pursuing squid, fish, and even smaller marine reptiles. Their jaws were lined with sharp teeth, perfectly suited for grasping slippery prey. Imagine an ichthyosaur diving beneath the waves. The water is cool and shadowy, schools of fish darting in nervous patterns. With a flick of its tail, it accelerates, closing the distance in seconds. Its jaws snap shut, and the fish vanish in a cloud of scales. These hunters were not clumsy giants, but precision predators, streamlined by evolution for efficiency. Plesiosaurs, the long-necked hunters. If ichthyosaurs were built for speed, the plesiosaurs represented a stranger design. With bodies shaped like turtles, flippers that beat like wings underwater, and necks stretching up to 7 meters long. They looked like nothing else on Earth. Their long necks allowed them to approach prey stealthily, keeping their bulky bodies hidden while their heads darted forward like snakes. Fossilized stomach contents suggest they fed on fish and small squid, using speed bursts and ambush tactics. Picture standing on a Jurassic shoreline. The water is calm, the surface broken only by ripples. Then a small head, like that of a serpent, rises silently above the surface. Behind it, unseen beneath the waves, lies a massive body, flippers moving in eerie silence. This was the plesiosaur's advantage, to appear almost harmless until it struck. Pliosaurs, the apex monsters, but even plesiosaurs, were not the ultimate hunters of their age. That title belonged to their relatives, the pliosaurs. Unlike their long-necked cousins, pliosaurs had shorter necks, massive jaws, and muscular bodies built for raw power. Some, like Liopleurodon, may have reached lengths of over 20 meters, with skulls longer than an adult human. Their teeth were conical and serrated, designed not just to catch prey but to crush bones. A single bite could shatter the spine of a smaller reptile. They hunted ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, and anything else that dared to cross their path. Imagine being suspended in Jurassic waters, the light dimming as clouds pass overhead. Suddenly, a shadow larger than a bus looms below. A pair of jaws yawns open, each tooth the size of a knife. With a single surge, the pliosaur rockets upward, its body displacing water like a living torpedo. There is no escape. In the hierarchy of the Jurassic seas, the pliosaur was king. Sharks and other hunters, the Jurassic oceans, were also home to early sharks. Though smaller than the giants of the Cretaceous, they were already formidable hunters, slicing through schools of fish with streamlined bodies. Alongside them swam armored fish, rays, and early telests, forming the diverse prey base that sustained larger predators. Ammonite spiral-shelled relatives of modern squid filled the seas in staggering numbers. Some grew as large as a wagon wheel, their shells swirling with intricate patterns. They were not only prey for reptiles, but also survivors of extinction, carrying their lineage through multiple global upheavals. The web of the Jurassic oceans. What made the Jurassic seas so extraordinary was the way predators and prey interacted. Schools of fish darted beneath reefs. Ammonites pulsed upward with jet-propelled motions. Ichthyosaurs streaked after them in bursts of speed. Plesiosaurs drifted silently, necks weaving through shoals. And pliosaurs lurked in the deeper waters, striking with devastating force. Every level of the food chain was alive with tension. The smallest plankton fed filter-feeding fish. Those fish fed schools of predators. And at the top of it all swam reptiles so massive that even the largest dinosaurs on land might have seemed modest by comparison. The sense of fear and wonder to imagine the Jurassic seas is to imagine an alien world just beneath the surface of our own. The water was warm and filled with life, but it carried danger with every movement. Sound traveled faster underwater, and vibrations from approaching hunters could be felt before they were seen. Shadows stretched unnaturally, blurring the line between safe distance and immediate threat. For early mammals and reptiles venturing near the shore, the seas were both a source of food and a source of terror. For ammonites, it was an endless cycle of drifting, breeding, and being consumed. For ichthyosaurs and pliosaurs, it was a theater of constant pursuit and sudden violence. The ocean was not a place of rest. It was a battlefield played out in silence, broken only by the rush of water and the snap of jaws. The legacy of the Jurassic oceans. Though the great reptiles of the sea are long gone, their legacy lives on. Whales and dolphins echo the streamlined designs of ichthyosaurs. Modern sharks descend from the early hunters of those seas. And ammonites, though extinct, left behind fossil shells that still captivate us with their beauty. The Jurassic oceans remind us of a profound truth. While dinosaurs ruled the land, the seas belonged to another empire entirely. An empire where speed, stealth, and power decided everything. And where even the most powerful hunters lived under constant threat from something larger, faster, and hungrier. It was a world of silence and shadows, where fear and wonder moved together through the endless blue. Lurked both above and below. Pterosaurs evolved extraordinary adaptations to survive here. Their wings were not simply stretched skin. They contained a network of muscles, blood vessels, and fibers that gave them both strength and flexibility. This allowed them to maneuver with a precision that even modern birds struggle to match. Some species were gliders, riding thermals above coastlines for hours without flapping. Others were agile hunters, capable of sudden dives and sharp turns that rivaled falcons. Their bodies, though light, were not fragile. Strong chest muscles powered their wing beats, and their beaks were adapted to their diet. Some had long needle-like jaws filled with teeth for snaring fish. Others bore crests that may have been used for steering, display, or even regulating body temperature. Coastal hunters, much of the Jurassic world was covered in shallow seas and coastlines, and pterosaurs made these environments their strongholds. Standing on four limbs, they could walk along beaches, launching themselves into the air with powerful leaps. From above, they scanned the water for signs of prey. Imagine standing at the edge of a Jurassic shoreline. The waves crash against limestone cliffs. Overhead, shadows pass pterosaurs with wingspans of 6 or 7 meters, circling patiently. Suddenly, one folds its wings and plummets downward. Its jaws snap just above the surface, pulling a writhing fish into the air. With a few beats of its wings, it climbs again, disappearing into the clouds. These were hunters as skilled in the skies as ichthyosaurs were in the sea. Diversity of designs, the Jurassic skies were filled with many forms of pterosaurs, each specialized for survival. Rhamphorhynchus, with its long tail tipped with a diamond-shaped vein, it soared like a living kite. Its sharp teeth were perfect for catching fish, and fossil evidence shows it may have hunted in groups. Dimorphodon, a short, stocky flyer with a large head and broad wings. It was agile, darting through forests in pursuit of insects and small prey. Pterodactylus, the creature that gave the entire group its name. With wingspans of about 1 meter, it filled the skies in swarms, playing the role that seagulls occupy today. Each species carved out a role in the ecosystem, from aerial predator to scavenger to fisher. Together, they ruled the skies as completely as dinosaurs ruled the land. Predators in the air, but the skies were not safe, simply because pterosaurs ruled them. Competition was fierce. Pterosaurs preyed on each other, and some may have stolen food from rivals in midair. The fossil record even suggests clashes between species, with bite marks and broken bones preserved in ancient stone. For the smaller creatures of the Jurassic world, the danger was constant. Tiny mammals creeping along the forest floor risked being plucked away by a swooping shadow. Small dinosaurs were vulnerable too, their movements watched from above by eyes adapted to spot even the faintest twitch. To live under the rule of pterosaurs was to live in fear of the sky itself. The enigma of the crests, one of the most striking features of many pterosaurs, was the presence of large head crests. Some were small ridges, others were elaborate sails that stretched taller than the skull itself. Their function remains debated. Perhaps they were aerodynamic, helping with steering in strong winds. Perhaps they were thermoregulatory, shedding heat during flight. But many paleontologists suspect they were display brightly colored signals for mating, dominance, or intimidation. Imagine a cliffside full of pterosaurs, their crests painted in vivid hues, flashing in the sun as they called to one another in shrill cries. The skies of the Jurassic would not have been silent. They would have been filled with the noise of wings and voices. The role of pterosaurs in the ecosystem. Pterosaurs were more than hunters. They were part of the great balance of the Jurassic world. By preying on fish and small animals, they kept populations in check. By scavenging carcasses, they recycled nutrients into the ecosystem. and by moving across vast distances, they spread seeds and spores, shaping the environment in ways we are only beginning to understand. They were not simply monsters of the sky. They were architects of it, sky of shadows and fear. To imagine the Jurassic skies is to imagine a world where every glance upward carried unease. The horizon was alive with wings, their shadows sweeping over cliffs, beaches, and forests. The air carried the sound of flapping membranes and piercing cries. Every small creature lived under the threat of attack from above. The sea might have been dangerous, and the land filled with predators, but the sky was no refuge. It was yet another arena of survival. And in this arena, the pterosaurs were unrivaled. The legacy of the lords of the skies, though birds would eventually inherit the air, the reign of pterosaurs came first. For millions of years, they defined what it meant to fly, pushing evolution into new and astonishing forms. Their fossils remind us that flight did not begin as gentle or graceful. It began as a battle for dominance. As creatures stretched their bodies into wings and seized the open air as their empire, the Jurassic skies were not empty. They were crowded, dangerous, and filled with predators, whose wings turned even the heavens into a hunting ground. The pterosaurs were the lords of the skies, reign of shadows and wings, of crests and cries, of hunters that redefined what it meant to survive on Earth. This adaptation was vital in fueling their massive bodies. Columnar legs, thick pillar-like legs, supported their weight, each foot cushioned with pads that absorbed shock as they moved across uneven ground. Whip-like tails. Some sauropods could crack their tails at supersonic speeds, creating sounds that may have been used for communication or defense. Their anatomy was not just about survival. It was about thriving at a scale no other land animal has ever achieved. Forest architects, the impact of sauropods on their environment was immense. These giants were walking ecosystems. Each day, a single adult might consume hundreds of kilograms of plant matter. Their long necks allowed them to graze high into the canopy, stripping leaves from trees that smaller herbivores could never reach. In doing so, they reshaped forests, pruning them like living bulldozers. Their constant feeding opened space for sunlight to reach the forest floor, allowing new plants to grow. Their massive bodies trampled pathways that smaller creatures could follow. Even their dung, produced in staggering quantities, fertilized the land and spread seeds across vast distances. Where sauropods walked, the land itself changed. Herds of giants. Though we often picture sauropods as solitary, fossils suggest many traveled in herds. Imagine valleys filled with dozens of these creatures, their necks rising and falling like ships on a vast sea. The ground would have shaken beneath their steps. Dust clouds would have risen in their wake. The sound of their calls, low, resonant bellows that could travel for kilometers, would have filled the air. Two predators, a herd was both opportunity and danger. Young sauropods were vulnerable, but the adults were living fortresses. Single swing of a tail could shatter bones. In herds, their strength was multiplied, creating walls of flesh and bone that no predator could easily breach. The challenge of predators still, even giants had enemies. The Jurassic world was home to massive carnivores, such as Allosaurus, a predator that could reach nearly 10 meters in length. Fossil evidence shows bite marks on sauropod bones, proof of clashes between predator and prey. But taking down an adult sauropod was nearly impossible. Instead, carnivores likely targeted the young, the weak, or the isolated. A juvenile sauropod separated from its herd was vulnerable, and predators would have seized any chance to exploit this. These battles must have been scenes of chaos. Herds trumpeting, tails lashing, predators circling, and the earth trembling under the weight of life and death struggles. Lives measured in centuries. One of the most extraordinary aspects of sauropods was their lifespan. While smaller dinosaurs may have lived a few decades, some sauropods could have lived for more than 100 years. Their slow growth, immense size, and resilience made them creatures of deep time. A single sauropod might have witnessed generations of predators rise and fall, outliving entire herds of other animals. Their longevity gave them a perspective on the Jurassic world that few other creatures shared. Giants in the sky. Their size also had consequences for the skies above them. As sauropods stripped trees and opened clearings, they created habitats for flying reptiles. Pterosaurs circled above herds, scavenging scraps or hunting small creatures disturbed by the giants below. Birds were still in their infancy, but already the skies and the land were linked by the actions of these colossal herbivores. The movement of sauropod herds across landscapes shaped not only the ground they walked on, but also the very skies above them. The awe of giants, what would it feel like to stand among them? Imagine the ground shaking with every step, the air filled with the low rumble of their calls, the smell of crushed vegetation and damp earth, the sight of necks swinging like cranes through the forest canopy. Would not simply be, it would be terror as well. Careless step could crush anything beneath. A swing of the tail could kill without intent. To live in the shadow of sauropods was to live in a world where the very scale of life dwarfed you completely. The legacy of the sauropods were more than dinosaurs. They were experiments in scale, proof that life could push beyond limits we once thought impossible. They were living mountains, reshaping the earth with every step, leaving behind tracks so vast they can still be seen today, pressed into stone for millions of years. Their reign during the Jurassic was a testament to the power of evolution when given time and opportunity. And though they eventually fell to extinction, their memory lingers not only in fossils, but in our imagination. Whenever we think of giants, we think of them. The Jurassic was not only the age of hunters, nor only the age of pterosaurs. It was the age of giant creatures, whose size redefined what it meant to exist on land. The sauropods stood at the heart of this world, colossal beings whose every breath and every step shaped life around them. They were not just animals. They were the colossal architects of the Jurassic, but no less fearsome hunter. With a distinctive horn on its snout and rows of blade-like teeth, Ceratosaurus had a reputation for being one of the most terrifying predators of its age. Ceratosaurus lived in wetter, swampier environments than Allosaurus, often lurking near rivers and lakes where it could ambush prey. Its long, flexible body and powerful tail made it an excellent swimmer, giving it a deadly advantage near water. Fossils suggested hunted fish, small dinosaurs, and even scavenged from larger kills. The presence of Ceratosaurus alongside Allosaurus is proof that the Jurassic ecosystem was rich enough to support multiple top predators, each carving out its own niche. Torvosaurus the heavyweight, if Allosaurus was the lion and Ceratosaurus the crocodile-like ambusher, then Torvosaurus was the bear of the Jurassic. Growing up to 11 meters long, this predator was one of the largest theropods of its age. Its sheer bulk made it slower, but its jaws were among the most powerful of the Jurassic carnivores. Torvosaurus likely hunted alone, relying on ambush tactics. With teeth nearly the size of a human hand, Its bite could tear chunks of flesh from even the largest sauropods. Unlike Allosaurus, which may have used agility and teamwork, Torvosaurus was a solitary powerhouse, dominating regions it claimed as territory, hunting the giants. But how did these predators face the towering sauropods, creatures that weighed dozens of tons and could swat with tails like whips? Fossil evidence suggests the predators targeted the vulnerable, the young, the sick, and the isolated. Imagine a herd of Diplodocus moving slowly across a valley. Dozens of necks sway high above the canopy, tails sweep in arcs, and the ground shakes beneath their steps. At the edges of the herd, juveniles struggle to keep pace. From the shadows of the forest, Allosaurus eyes them, waiting for weakness. The attack is swift. Coordinated group rushes from concealment, claws lashing, teeth tearing. The herd panics, trumpeting, stomping, lashing tails in defense. Dust clouds rise. As predators dart in and out, testing the defenses. If one juvenile stumbles, the pack seizes its chance, dragging the young sauropod down in a frenzy of teeth and blood. For the predators, patience and timing were everything. For the sauropods, survival meant staying together, for even the giants could fall. The power of the bite studies of Allosaurus skulls suggest its jaws were not as strong as those of T-Rex. Instead of a bone-crushing bite, Allosaurus likely used a slash-and-tear strategy. Its head functioned like a hatchet, striking with powerful neck muscles and using its serrated teeth to open deep wounds. Once blood flowed, the prey weakened quickly, making it easier for the predators to finish the job. It was less about brute force and more about attrition, death by 1,000 cuts. Torvosaurus, on the other hand, relied on raw power. Its bite marks found on sauropod bones suggest it could tear through flesh and muscle in a single devastating strike. Ceratosaurus, with its crocodile-like build, may have used ambushes near water, dragging prey into swamps in scenes that would remind us of modern crocodiles overpowering wildebeests on African riverbanks. Scavengers and thieves, predators of the Jurassic, were not always hunters. They were also scavengers. Fossil sites reveal multiple carnivores feeding on the same carcass. Imagine a half-eaten sauropod lying in a clearing. Its massive body attracts Allosaurus, Ceratosaurus, Torvosaurus, and even smaller predators like ornitholosts. The air fills with the stench of blood, the buzzing of insects, and the sound of snarls as jaws snap and claws slash in fights over the feast. Such scenes were common. In a world where survival was brutal, no meal could be wasted. Night hunters. Not all predators hunted in broad daylight. Some may have been nocturnal, using the cover of darkness to stalk prey. The Jurassic nights would have been filled with the sounds of insects, croaking amphibians, and the low, rumbling calls of dinosaurs. In the darkness, the glint of serrated teeth or the sudden thump of clawed feet on the ground would have been the last thing many creatures ever sensed. The moonlight reflecting off the scales of Ceratosaurus by a riverbank, the shadow of Allosaurus passing silently through a grove of conifers, such sights would have struck terror into the hearts of Jurassic prey. The role of predators in balance, though terrifying, these predators were essential to the Jurassic ecosystem. Culling the weak and the sick, they kept sauropod herds healthy and prevented overpopulation. Their presence forced herbivores to evolve better defenses, longer tails, herding instincts, thicker hides. Predators and prey were locked in an eternal arms race, each shaping the other's evolution. Without Allosaurus and its kin, the Jurassic would have been unbalanced, its vast herds unchecked, its forests consumed too quickly. The terror of encounter. To imagine meeting one of these predators is to imagine standing at the mercy of nature itself. The ground vibrates with approaching footsteps. A low growl echoes from the trees. Then it emerges, a shadow of muscle and teeth, eyes gleaming, head swinging with predatory focus. There would be no time to run. No tree tall enough, no cave deep enough, no weapon sharp enough. In the world of the Jurassic, humans would not be hunters. We would be prey. Legacy of the Jurassic predators today: their bones lie in stone, their teeth and claws displayed in museums. But in life, they were lords of tooth and claw, shaping the Jurassic as much as the sauropods themselves. Their dominance would not last forever. New predators would rise in the Cretaceous, but during their age, they were the embodiment of power, ferocity, and fear. They were not just hunters, they were the shadows that stalked every step of the Jurassic world. Canopy in search of buzzing prey. Others adapted to life by the water, skimming rivers and lakes for fish. Their ability to fill so many roles made them one of the most successful groups of the Jurassic. Rulers of the coastlines of the Jurassic were dominated by pterosaurs like Rhamphorhynchus, with long, narrow jaws filled with sharp teeth and wings stretching up to 2 meters. They were perfectly adapted for life above the waves. Fossil evidence suggests they hunted fish much like modern seabirds, swooping down, snatching prey, and swallowing it midair. Picture a rocky shoreline at dawn. Waves crash against cliffs. Colony of pterosaurs clings to the rock face, their wings folded tight. The rising sun. They launch into the air, dozens at a time. They wheel and dive, shrieking calls echoing across the surf. Below, schools of fish glitter near the surface, unaware that death circles above. Social creatures. Some evidence suggests that pterosaurs may have been social animals. Fossil nesting sites reveal dozens of eggs clustered together, hinting at colonies much like those of modern seabirds. Imagine cliffs covered in nests, the air alive with the beating of wings. Hatchlings chirping, and adults returning with food. Life in such colonies would not have been peaceful. Predators prowled nearby dinosaurs like small theropods eager to snatch eggs or hatchlings. To defend their young, pterosaurs may have relied on sheer numbers, mobbing predators with flashing wings and sharp beaks. Skies of the Jurassic. The Jurassic skies would have been alive with movement. Flocks of smaller pterosaurs darted through the air like swallows, chasing insects. Larger species soared on rising thermals, drifting for miles over open plains. At sunset, the horizon might have darkened with their silhouettes. Dozens of wings folding and unfolding as they returned to their roosts. The soundscape of the Jurassic was not just the trumpeting of sauropods or the growls of predators. It was also the shrieks, screeches, and beating wings of pterosaurs filling the air above. Competition with dinosaurs. Though pterosaurs ruled the skies, they were not without rivals. On the ground, feathered dinosaurs like Archaeopteryx were beginning to experiment with flight. These early birds were clumsy compared to pterosaurs, but they represented the dawn of a new competitor. For millions of years, pterosaurs and early birds shared the skies. But where birds had feathers that allowed for better insulation and more efficient flight, leathersaurs remained dependent on their fragile, leathery wings. In the long run, it would be the birds who triumphed. But in the Jurassic, the skies belonged to pterosaurs. Predators and prey. Life in the air was not without danger. Pterosaurs faced threats both from above and below. Large Jurassic predators like Allosaurus would have gladly seized a grounded pterosaur, while marine reptiles like plesiosaurs and ichthyosaurs lurked beneath the waves, snapping at any pterosaur that ventured too low. Even in flight, danger loomed. Clashes between rival pterosaurs over food or nesting sites could be deadly, their beaks snapping and wings tangling midair before tumbling into the sea below. Giants of the future. Though Jurassic pterosaurs were impressive, they were only the beginning. In the Cretaceous, their descendants would grow into giants with wingspans over 10 meters, creatures like Quetzalcoatlus that could rival small planes in size. But these later titans stood on the shoulders of their Jurassic ancestors. It was here, in this age of giants on land, that the skies first became a battlefield, filled with hunters, scavengers, and survivors carried on wings of skin and bone. Legacy of the pterosaurs today. We often confuse pterosaurs with birds or flying dinosaurs. But they were something else entirely, an evolutionary experiment in flight that lasted for over 150 million years. Their fossils remind us that the skies have always been contested territory, shaped by those bold enough to leap from the ground and trust the air to hold them. The pterosaurs were the first to make that leap, and for a time they were unmatched. They remind us of a world where the skies themselves were alive with predators, and where every shadow overhead might not have been a cloud, but a winged reptile circling in search of prey. Jurassic seas as a school of fish suddenly scatters. Out of the gloom, a sleek shape emerges, its body glittering like polished stone. Its jaws snapping shut around prey with terrifying precision. That was an ichthyosaur, hunt-swift, efficient, and unstoppable. Some species, like Ophthalmosaurus, grew over 6 meters long. Others reached lengths of 15 meters, true leviathans of the deep. Fossil stomachs reveal their diet: fish, squid, and sometimes even other reptiles. They were the sprinters of the Jurassic oceans, capable of bursts of speed that made them unmatched hunters. The plesiosaurs, serpents of the sea. If ichthyosaurs were built for speed, the plesiosaurs were built for elegance and endurance. Their bodies were broad and barrel-shaped. Their limbs transformed into 4 powerful flippers that propelled them through the water in a motion similar to the flight of penguins. But what made them unforgettable was their necks. Some plesiosaurs had necks stretching several meters longer than their bodies, tipped with small heads filled with sharp teeth. Imagine drifting in the water, watching as a long-necked shadow glides beneath you. At first it seems too slender to be dangerous, but then the head darts forward like a striking snake, seizing fish with lightning speed. This was the hunting style of Elasmosaurus and its kin. Their long necks allowed them to ambush prey from a distance, striking without warning. For centuries, plesiosaur fossils inspired tales of sea serpents and lake monsters. Even today, some legends of creatures like the Loch Ness Monster owe their imagery to these ancient reptiles. The pliosaurs, giants with jaws of death, while plesiosaurs stretched their necks into elegant weapons. Their close relatives, the pliosaurs, took a very different approach. They evolved shorter necks, but massive skulls filled with teeth as long as knives. Among them was Liopleurodon, one of the most fearsome predators of all time. Estimates suggest it reached lengths of over 10 meters, with jaws capable of crushing bone in a single bite. Imagine a crocodile stretched to monstrous size, fitted with flippers, and given the power to lunge through the water with devastating force. In the Jurassic seas, to encounter a pliosaur was to face certain death. Fish, squid, and even other marine reptiles fell victim to its crushing bite. Fossil bite marks on plesiosaur bones reveal that these titans did not hesitate to attack their own kind. Hunting the Jurassic seas, the oceans of the Jurassic were theaters of constant struggle. Schools of fish shimmered like silver rivers, only to be torn apart by ichthyosaurs darting like torpedoes. Plesiosaurs cruised with quiet grace, their long necks weaving through the water, striking prey in sudden bursts. Above them all, the pliosaurs lurked, their sheer power turning them into apex predators without rival. Imagine the soundscape of these seas, the splash of giant flippers beating the water, the crack of jaws closing around prey, the desperate rush of fish scattering into the depths. It was a world where survival meant speed, stealth, or sheer strength, and often even that was not enough. Life and death in the colonies. Evidence suggests that some ichthyosaurs gave birth at sea, delivering live young tail first to prevent drowning. Fossil skeletons capture these moments, frozen in stone mothers with unborn offspring still within them. A haunting glimpse into the cycle of life and death in the ancient oceans. Plesiosaurs may have laid eggs on beaches like modern sea turtles, returning to the land in dangerous pilgrimages. If true, it would mean these titans of the sea still relied on fragile connections to the shore. Each nesting season would have been a gauntlet, with hatchlings racing desperately toward the waves. Many snatched up by predators before ever reaching safety. Rivals and threats, marine reptiles were not alone in the seas. Sharks prowled the waters, some species already resembling their modern descendants. Giant squid-like cephalopods lurked in the depths, their tentacles ready to ensnare the unwary. Even within their own ranks, competition was fierce. Pliosaurs attacked plesiosaurs. Ichthyosaurs fought each other over prey. The seas were a battleground where every encounter could mean life or death. The decline of the ichthyosaurs, though ichthyosaurs dominated much of the Jurassic, their reign would not last forever. By the Cretaceous, they began to decline, outcompeted by other predators in changing seas. Yet during their peak, they were among the most specialized hunters Earth had ever seen, perfectly adapted to their watery realm. Legacy of the Jurassic seas, the marine reptiles of the Jurassic remind us that dominance is not confined to the land. While dinosaurs thundered across continents, the oceans were ruled by creatures just as terrifying, just as awe-inspiring. They show us how evolution can reshape bodies in extraordinary ways, legs into flippers, tails into rudders, and teeth into weapons of unimaginable power. If the land of the Jurassic was a kingdom of giants, then the seas were an empire of monsters, each one built to hunt, survive, and rule. To swim in those waters would have been to enter a nightmare, one where every shadow might be a predator, and where the silence of the deep was broken only by the rush of jaws closing around prey. Colossal beasts marched together, their footsteps echoing like distant thunder. For predators, a herd of sauropods was both opportunity and nightmare-moving, wall of flesh too massive to take down easily, yet filled with vulnerable young that could be targeted. Stegosaurus, the armored guardian, while sauropods embodied size and scale, Stegosaurus represented defense and resilience. This dinosaur, with its double row of towering plates along its back and its spiked tail known as a thagomizer, was one of the most unique creatures of the Jurassic. Growing up to 9 meters long, Stegosaurus was a walking fortress. The plates on its back may have been used for thermoregulation, display, or even intimidation. But the real weapons were the 4 spikes at the end of its tail. Fossil evidence shows that Stegosaurus did not hesitate to use them. In fact, paleontologists have found Allosaurus bones pierced with wounds that match the spacing of Stegosaurus's tail spikes, a clear sign of deadly encounters between predator and prey. Despite its heavy armor, Stegosaurus had a surprisingly small brain, sometimes compared to the size of a walnut. But survival did not depend on intelligence. Its body was designed to endure attack, to survive in a world filled with predators that stalked the forests and plains. Allosaurus, apex predator of the Jurassic. If the sauropods were the giants and Stegosaurus the armored defender, then Allosaurus was the undisputed apex predator of the Jurassic. Allosaurus was a massive carnivore, reaching lengths of up to 12 meters and weighing over 2 tons. With sharp teeth, powerful jaws, and strong forelimbs tipped with 3 razor claws, it was perfectly built to hunt. Fossils reveal that Allosaurus had an unusually flexible jaw, allowing it to open its mouth wider than many other predators. This adaptation may have allowed it to attack large prey, slicing deep wounds, and then retreating as blood loss weakened its victims, unlike the solitary predators we often imagine. Some evidence suggests that Allosaurus may have hunted in groups, at least opportunistically. Picture a herd of sauropods moving slowly across the plain. From the shadows, several Allosaurs circle, waiting for a weak or young individual to stray from the herd. With sudden speed, they rush in, slashing with claws and teeth, leaving wounds that would slowly sap the prey's strength. For hours, maybe even days, the predators could follow, waiting for exhaustion to claim their victim. Even armored dinosaurs like Stegosaurus were not safe. Fossil injuries show that clashes between Stegosaurus and Allosaurus were frequent, violent, and often deadly for both sides. The predator-prey relationship of these two giants may have been one of the most dramatic struggles of the entire Mesozoic. The Jurassic landscape. To understand these creatures, we must also imagine their world. The Jurassic landscape was warm, humid, and lush, filled with conifer forests, ferns, cycads, and horsetails. Flowering plants had not yet appeared, but the land was still thick with greenery, capable of sustaining herds of sauropods. Rivers and lakes carved through valleys, attracting both prey and predators. The soundscape would have been astonishing, herds of sauropods rumbling like distant thunder, Stegosaurus clattering its tail spikes in warning, and the chilling roar of Allosaurus echoing through the trees. This was not just a world of giants. Smaller dinosaurs scurried through the underbrush, pterosaurs soared overhead, and early mammals, tiny and fragile, scuttled in the shadows. But above them all, the titans of the Jurassic ruled. The balance of power. The Jurassic was defined by balance. The sauropods fed endlessly, shaping entire ecosystems with their appetites. The Stegosaurus and other herbivores defended themselves with armor and spikes, creating a constant test for predators. And Allosaurus stood at the top of the chain, eternal hunter whose very presence shaped the behavior of every other creature around it. It was a time of scale, of power, and of survival. Every day in the Jurassic was a contest between predator and prey, between defense and attack, between life and death. Legacy of the Jurassic Titans, the dinosaurs of the Jurassic left behind more than bones. They left behind a legacy of awe, etched into the very identity of what we imagine when we think of prehistoric life. Sauropods became the symbol of size, Allosaurus the image of ferocity, and Stegosaurus the embodiment of strange beauty. To walk among them would have been to enter a world where every creature seemed larger than life, where the air vibrated with the presence of beings that defied imagination. The Jurassic was not just an age of dinosaurs, it was an age of titans, from the air, circling back for another strike. These small pterosaurs were the unseen controllers of insect populations, performing the same role that bats do today. Their delicate bones rarely fossilized, but the traces we have show that they were abundant and diverse. They were the constant background presence of the Jurassic skies, flitting silently above while the larger giants captured our imagination. The giants of the air among the most spectacular creatures of the Jurassic were the larger pterosaurs. Some species reached wingspans of 8 to 10 meters, dwarfing many modern birds. Imagine looking up and seeing a shadow pass across the sun, its wings stretched as wide as a small airplane, its body streamlined for gliding over vast distances. These giants were not simply oversized insect hunters, they were apex aerial predators and scavengers, dominating coastlines and inland waterways. Some swooped down to snatch fish from the surface of lakes, while others scavenged carcasses left behind by land predators like Allosaurus. The most famous of these Jurassic flyers include Ramphorhynchus and Pterodactylus. Ramphorhynchus, with its long tail tipped by a diamond-shaped vein, soared over lagoons, its sharp teeth perfect for catching slippery prey. Pterodactylus, smaller but more numerous, became the namesake for the entire group, forever linking their identity with flight. Coastal kingdoms, much of pterosaur life was tied to the sea. The Jurassic world was dotted with shallow inland seas, lagoons, and coastlines, rich in fish. Here, pterosaurs reigned supreme. Fossil beds in Germany, particularly the Solnhofen limestone, preserve entire snapshots of this world pterosaurs locked in flight. Fish clutched in their jaws, wings preserved in stunning detail. These fossils show that pterosaurs were not clumsy gliders, as once thought, but highly skilled flyers. Some soared effortlessly for hours, riding thermal currents over the water. Others were agile divers, plunging into the waves and rising again with wriggling fish in their beaks. Their dominance of the skies was absolute, rivaled only by the future seabirds that would one day evolve from dinosaurs. Diversity of design. What makes pterosaurs so fascinating is their sheer diversity. Some had long, narrow wings built for gliding over open seas. Others had shorter, broader wings designed for darting through forests. Some had jaws filled with needle-like teeth, perfect for catching fish, while others had toothless beaks, more suited to scavenging or cracking hard food. Their crests also varied wildly. Some were small and functional, while others grew into extravagant shapes taller than their skulls. The purpose of these crests is still debated. Some scientists believe they helped with flight stability, while others argue they were purely for display, much like the antlers of a deer or the feathers of a peacock. Whatever their function, they added to the alien beauty of these creatures, making them some of the most visually striking animals to ever exist. Pterosaurs and dinosaurs. A shared world, it is important to remember that pterosaurs were not dinosaurs, though they lived alongside them. They belonged to a separate branch of reptiles, evolving flight independently. Yet their fates were tied together. While dinosaurs thundered across the ground, pterosaurs ruled the skies above, creating a world where no ecosystem was untouched by reptilian dominance. The interactions between these groups must have been constant. Pterosaurs scavenged the kills of predators like Allosaurus, swooping down to steal scraps. Dinosaurs, in turn, may have stolen pterosaur eggs from nests built on cliffs or beaches. It was a world of competition, cooperation, and constant survival. Masters of the skies. By the late Jurassic, pterosaurs had fully established themselves as the rulers of the skies. Their dominance was unmatched, their diversity astonishing. From insect hunters no larger than sparrows to soaring giants that darkened the sun, they filled every niche the air could offer. The image of the Jurassic is not complete without them. Imagine standing on a coastline as herds of sauropods move in the distance. Above, the sky is alive with winged pterosaurs circling, diving, and gliding with effortless grace. Their cries echo across the waves, their shadows flicker across the ground, and their presence reminds us that the age of giants was not confined to the earth alone. The pterosaurs remind us of something profound. Evolution does not stop at the ground. It reaches upward into the skies, creating creatures so extraordinary that even millions of years later, their fossils stir awe and wonder. That lay eggs, ichthyosaurs bore live young, just like whales and dolphins. Fossils preserve mothers caught in the act of giving birth, a haunting reminder that even in death, life cycle was written into the stone. The plesiosaurs, long-necked hunters sharing the seas with the ichthyosaurs, were the plesiosaurs, a group that looked like no creature before or since. Their bodies were broad and powerful, with 4 massive flippers that allowed them to fly through the water like penguins on steroids. But it was their necks that made them so distinctive. Some plesiosaurs had necks stretching more than 6 meters long, lined with dozens of vertebrae. Their small heads perched at the end like serpents gliding through the waves. With these long, flexible necks, plesiosaurs could maneuver their heads with precision, striking at schools of fish or squid from unexpected angles. Picture standing on the shore of a Jurassic lagoon. The water ripples, and suddenly a long neck rises from the surface, turning silently as if scanning the horizon. Then, with a flick, it vanishes again beneath the waves. It is no wonder that in later human history, creatures like plesiosaurs inspired myths of sea serpents and lake monsters. Not all plesiosaurs had long necks. Some evolved into pliosaurs, with shorter, more muscular necks and massive skulls filled with crushing jaws. These were the true super predators of the Jurassic oceans. Pliosaurs, apex killers of the deep. If the ichthyosaurs were the swift hunters and the plesiosaurs were the graceful stalkers, the pliosaurs were the ocean's ultimate killers. With skulls up to 3 meters long and jaws lined with teeth the size of bananas, they were the T-Rexes of the sea. The most famous pliosaur, Liopleurodon, may have reached lengths of 7 to 10 meters, though some estimates suggest even larger giants. Its bite force was immense, capable of crushing bone with a single snap. Liopleurodon hunted anything it chose: fish, cephalopods, ichthyosaurs, and even other plesiosaurs. Imagine diving into Jurassic waters and seeing the shadow of such a creature pass overhead. The flick of its flippers propels it forward silently, effortlessly. Then, in a sudden burst of speed, it strikes, jaws snapping shut around prey that never saw it coming. For millions of years, the pliosaurs were the terror of the seas. Their reign as absolute beneath the waves as Allosaurus was on land. Life in Jurassic oceans, the oceans of the Jurassic, were not just homes to reptiles. They were entire ecosystems filled with creatures that challenged imagination. Ammonites, spiral-shelled relatives of squid and octopuses, drifted in vast swarms, their shells glinting beneath the sunlight. Belemnites, another group of ancient cephalopods, shot through the water with jet-powered bursts, trying desperately to evade reptilian jaws. Sharks, already ancient by this time, swam alongside the reptiles, though they were smaller than many of today's species. Fish of every shape and size filled the seas, forming the base of the food web that sustained the marine giants above them. But at the top, always, were the reptiles. From ichthyosaurs diving deep, to long-necked plesiosaurs stalking the shallows, to pliosaurs patrolling open waters, the seas were saturated with predators. The alien beauty of the Jurassic seas. To step into a Jurassic ocean would be to enter a world both familiar and utterly alien. You might see the silhouette of an ichthyosaur darting past like a dolphin, but then realize its mouth is filled with teeth too sharp, its body too reptilian. You might spot the graceful neck of a plesiosaur breaking the surface, only to feel dread at the thought of what its head is hunting just beneath the waves. The seas would echo with the clicks, snaps, and splashes of constant pursuit. Shadows would dart past, some small, others so massive that they would block out the light. It was not a sea designed for human comfort. It was a sea of monsters where every ripple might signal a predator approaching. Triad of power together. The ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, and pliosaurs formed a triad of dominance. Each filled a different niche, and together they ensured that no part of the ocean was safe. Their rule was so complete that for millions of years they seemed unstoppable. Yet, like all rulers of Earth's past, their time would eventually pass. As the Jurassic ended and the Cretaceous began, new predators would rise, and the balance of power would shift once more. But during the height of the Jurassic, the seas belonged to them, unchallenged, unmatched, and unforgettable. In the grand story of life on Earth, the Jurassic oceans remind us that the age of giants was not confined to the land. While dinosaurs dominated forests and plains, and pterosaurs filled the skies, the seas held rulers every bit as fearsome. These marine reptiles were not mere background players. They were kings and queens of a realm as vast as the sky itself, shaping ecosystems, inspiring myths, and leaving fossils that still whisper of their power today. To imagine the Jurassic without them is impossible. They were the heartbeat of the oceans, the predators that turned seas into battlefields, and the lords of a watery world where survival was a dance between speed, stealth, and sheer power. Tail? Archaeopteryx was about the size of a crow with wings that could carry it into short bursts of flight. It probably could not soar like modern birds, but it could glide between trees, chase insects, and escape predators with sudden leaps into the air. Holding the fossil of Archaeopteryx is like holding a snapshot of evolution mid-step. It is both dinosaur and bird, a creature straddling two worlds forever frozen in stone as the bridge between ground and sky. The dinosaur-bird connection. For centuries, birds were seen as separate from dinosaurs. But fossil discoveries across China, Mongolia, and beyond have revealed a different story. Birds are not just descendants of dinosaurs. They are dinosaurs. Every sparrow in a city park, every eagle soaring across mountains, every hummingbird darting among flowers carries within it the legacy of the theropod line. Their hollow bones, their wishbones, their three-toed feet, and their feathers all trace back to small, agile predators that once shared the world with giants like Allosaurus. In this sense, the dinosaurs never truly went extinct. They live on, reshaped, refined, and feathered, filling the skies that their ancestors could only dream of reaching. Competing with pterosaurs, the rise of birds did not mean the end of pterosaurs. Not yet. For millions of years, the two groups shared the skies. Pterosaurs ruled the open air with massive wings built for soaring. Birds, smaller and more agile, occupied different niches, darting through forests, flitting between branches, and mastering rapid maneuvers that pterosaurs could not match. Over time, birds developed keener senses, faster metabolisms, and more efficient lungs. Their feathers gave them insulation and versatility, allowing them to live in environments where pterosaurs struggled. Slowly, they expanded their range from warm forests to cooler regions, adapting to climates and challenges that tested their endurance. The competition was fierce, but in the long run, it would be birds, not pterosaurs, that would inherit the skies. The power of flight. Flight was more than a new way to move. It was a revolution. With wings, birds could escape predators, explore new habitats, and chase prey others could not reach. They could nest in cliffs and trees far from danger. They could migrate across continents, following the seasons, carrying life into places that had been empty before. This mobility turned birds into some of the most successful creatures in Earth's history. While many lineages of dinosaurs would perish, the birds would endure, adapting to every continent, every ecosystem, and every challenge thrown at them. The skies were no longer just the realm of pterosaurs. They had become a battlefield of innovation, and the birds were ready to fight for dominance. A world forever changed. The rise of birds was not just a biological event. It was an ecological earthquake. Suddenly, small predators could hunt from above. Seeds could be carried vast distances in the bellies of feathered travelers. Insects faced new hunters that could pursue them into the air. Forests, plains, and coastlines all felt the impact of this new kind of life. The world was no longer divided only between land and sea. The sky itself had become a living arena, filled with wings and song. Echoes in the present. When we watch a bird take flight today, it is easy to forget how deep its story runs. The beating of its wings echoes the leaps of small dinosaurs chasing prey through Jurassic undergrowth. The feathers that shimmer in the sun carry the memory of scales transformed by survival. Every bird is a living fossil, a survivor of the great transformations that reshaped the Mesozoic. To see one is to glimpse the moment when dinosaurs refused to remain on the ground and claimed the skies as their own. In the story of life on Earth, few transitions are as dramatic as the rise of birds. They remind us that evolution is not a straight path, but a journey of constant reinvention. Out of claws and teeth came wings and song. Out of fear and survival came the freedom to soar. And while the age of dinosaurs would one day end in fire and ash, the birds would endure, carrying the legacy of that lost world into every dawn chorus, every shadow crossing the sky, every heartbeat of wings that still writes stories in the air above us. Their silhouettes rising above the trees like natural skyscrapers. To smaller creatures, the presence of these giants must have been overwhelming. Each step pressed deep into the soil, leaving tracks so vast that even today they can be walked in like shallow ponds. The ground trembled as they moved, a constant reminder that life on Earth had produced animals whose very existence bent the rules of possibility. Feeding the giants, the question that puzzles paleontologists, is simple. How did sauropods eat enough to survive? A creature the size of a building needs a staggering amount of food. Their solution was both simple and ingenious. Sauropods didn't chew. Instead, they stripped leaves with peg-like teeth and swallowed them whole. Inside their enormous stomachs, vast fermentation chambers broke down plant matter over long periods, extracting every ounce of energy. By skipping the time-consuming process of chewing, they could consume huge amounts of vegetation quickly and keep moving. Herds of sauropods likely reshaped entire ecosystems as they grazed, stripping forests bare, opening gaps in canopies, and leaving behind a mosaic of habitats for smaller animals to thrive in. Their appetites weren't just survival, they were ecological engines, constantly altering the world around them. The sound of giants to stand among sauropods was not only to see them, but to hear them. Their calls may have been deep, resonant rumbles, low-frequency sounds that traveled across kilometers, allowing herds to stay in contact even when spread across vast plains. And then there was the whip-crack of tails. Some scientists believe species like Diplodocus could snap their tails at supersonic speeds, producing cracks loud enough to startle predators or signal other herd members. Imagine the sound of thunder rolling not from the sky, but from the ground, produced by the movement of living giants. Herds on the move, sauropods were rarely alone. Fossil trackways suggest that they traveled in herds, sometimes made up of dozens of individuals. These gatherings were more than protection, they were the lifeblood of sauropod survival. Juveniles could stay within the herd, shielded by the towering bodies of adults. Predators like Allosaurus might have been deadly hunters, but even they would think twice before attacking a wall of moving mountains. Migration was likely a constant rhythm of their lives. To feed such massive bodies, sauropods had to keep moving, following the cycles of vegetation, rivers, and seasonal rains. Their paths shaped landscapes, their migrations carving invisible highways across ancient continents. Predators of the plains. Even the largest animals have enemies. The Jurassic was also home to apex predators like Allosaurus, whose jaws could tear into flesh with terrifying efficiency. But a predator, no matter how fierce, faced impossible odds against a fully grown sauropod. Instead, these hunters targeted the young, the weak, or the isolated. A calf separated from the herd was vulnerable, and the fossil record shows signs of battle's bones bearing the marks of teeth, skeletons frozen in moments of violence. It was a brutal reminder that even giants lived under the shadow of death. Titans in time, the reign of the sauropods lasted for over 100 million years. Spanning the Jurassic and much of the Cretaceous, they evolved into countless forms, some towering, others more compact, each adapted to different environments. Their persistence is staggering. No mammal has ever achieved such size, and no other land creature has so completely redefined what it means to be alive. To walk the earth in their age was to live among moving landscapes, creatures whose very presence shaped the destiny of ecosystems. Echoes in the present. Today, the sauropods are gone, their bones scattered across stone, their footprints pressed into ancient mud. But the awe they inspire has never left us. Every time we stand beneath the skeleton of a brachiosaurus in a museum hall, craning our necks to follow its towering spine, we feel the same mixture of fear and wonder that smaller creatures must have felt 150 million years ago. They remind us of the extremes of life, of how evolution can stretch the limits of biology until they nearly break. They remind us that our world was once filled not just with predators and prey, but with giants so immense they seemed like living mountains. The sauropods were more than dinosaurs. They were titans, the largest land animals ever to live, the rulers of the Jurassic Plains. Their story is a reminder of Earth's ability to create life on a scale almost beyond imagination. And though they are gone, their echoes remain, in the stone tracks we can still walk in the bones that stretch across museum ceilings, and in the awe that stirs every time we whisper their name. The giants of the earth. This hunting style was brutal but effective. In a world where prey often outweighed the predator many times over, Allosaurus relied on efficiency, not raw power. It didn't need to kill instantly. It needed to wound, weaken, and wait. Taking down giants, one of the greatest mysteries has always been. Could Allosaurus really hunt sauropods, the towering giants of its world? The answer is complex. A single Allosaurus, even at full strength, would have struggled to bring down an adult Brachiosaurus or Diplodocus. The size difference was simply too great. But the fossil record gives us clues that hint at extraordinary behavior cooperative hunting. Some bone beds contain the remains of multiple Allosaurus individuals together, suggesting they may have gathered in groups. Whether this was true pack hunting or opportunistic feeding is debated, but the possibility is haunting. Imagine a herd of sauropods moving slowly across the plains, while from the shadows several Allosaurus circle, striking not at the adults, but at the calves. One predator slashes, another distracts, a third delivers the final blow. Against teamwork, even giants were vulnerable. Evidence of healed bite marks on sauropod bones tells us that these battles happened often. The titans were not untouchable. They lived under the constant pressure of predators testing their strength. The fear of stegosaurs. Not all prey were easy victims. In fact, some could fight back with deadly force. Chief among them were the stegosaurs. With their spiked tails, sometimes for long spears mounted at the end, stegosaurs were walking fortresses. Fossil evidence reveals gruesome encounters. One Allosaurus vertebra has been found pierced by a stegosaur tail spike, the wound so deep that the predator almost certainly died from it. These battles must have been breathtakingly violent, Allosaurus rushing in with teeth and claws. The stegosaur swinging its spiked tail like a living mace. For every successful hunt, there were failures, injuries, and deaths. Predators lived dangerously. To be an apex hunter in the Jurassic was not to be invincible, but to survive by constantly risking everything. The mind of a killer, what made Allosaurus especially formidable, was not just its weapons, but its brain. Studies of its skull suggest a keen sense of smell and good vision. Its eyes were positioned slightly forward, giving it binocular vision and depth perception, crucial for timing attacks. Its brain may not have been large compared to modern mammals, but it was efficient, enough to coordinate attacks, assess threats, and take advantage of opportunities. Unlike reptiles of earlier ages, Allosaurus was warm-blooded enough to sustain bursts of speed. It could sprint across the plains, ambush from cover, and pursue fleeing prey with terrifying energy. To its victims, it was not just a predator, it was a relentless shadow. Life in a world of violence, Allosaurus did not live alone. Fossils of multiple individuals suggest it may have tolerated others of its kind, though competition was fierce. Battles between rivals left scars on bones, teeth marks, claw rakes, shattered jaws. Even among predators, survival was not guaranteed. Juveniles were vulnerable not only to other predators, but sometimes to adults of their own species. Cannibalism is possible, hinted at in fossil evidence. In a harsh world, even Allosaurus may have turned on its own kind when hunger demanded it. A predator's legacy. For millions of years, Allosaurus ruled the Jurassic. Its dominance was not brief, it spanned over 10 million years, shaping the behavior of every other creature in its ecosystem. Sauropods migrated, stegosaurs defended themselves, and smaller dinosaurs moved in flocks, all under the shadow of Allosaurus. But like all rulers, its time eventually ended. As the Jurassic gave way to the Cretaceous, ecosystems shifted, climates changed, and new predators began to emerge. Yet the memory of Allosaurus remains preserved in stone, a reminder that long before T-Rex, there was another king of predators. Echoes in stone today, the fossilized skeleton of an Allosaurus still carries the weight of its reign. When you stand before one in a museum, the teeth gleam as if ready to strike. The claws curl as if reaching for prey, and the skull tilts forward in eternal hunger. It is more than bone. It is the memory of an animal that once dictated the rules of survival across entire continents. An animal that challenged giants, that battled armored foes, that thrived in a world of violence and fear. To speak the name Allosaurus is to invoke the shadow of the Jurassic, the storm that hunted among the living mountains. Potentially over 1/2 meter long, jutted outward from the muscular tail. Fossil evidence shows they were not just for displays. Spikes were worn at the tips, ground down by repeated impacts. Even more chilling, paleontologists have found Allosaurus bones pierced clean through by stegosaur spikes. One famous specimen shows a hole punched directly into a vertebra, the injury almost certainly fatal. These were not idle threats. Stegosaurs fought back, and they killed. Imagine the scene. An Allosaurus charges, jaws open, claws reaching. At the last second, the stegosaur swings its tail with bone-crushing force. The spikes whistle through the air and slam into the predator's chest. Ribs snap, flesh tears. The hunter staggers away, mortally wounded. The fortress had struck back. It's the brain of a giant, and yet for all its might, Stegosaurus carried a curious weakness. Its brain was famously smaller, on the size of a walnut, compared to its massive body. Early paleontologists even speculated it must have had a second brain in its hips to control the rear half of its body. While this idea has since been debunked, the truth remains. Stegosaurs were not built for cleverness. But intelligence is not the only measure of survival. Instead, stegosaurs relied on instinct and design. Their low-slung bodies made them difficult to topple. Their tails, powered by enormous muscles, could swing with deadly precision, even without advanced thinking. In a world ruled by predators, brute instinct was enough. Life among the giant stegosaurs lived alongside the great sauropods, grazing in the same floodplains and forests. Unlike the towering herbivores that stripped leaves from treetops, stegosaurs focused on low-lying plants, ferns, cycads, and shrubs. Their narrow, toothless beaks clipped vegetation, while small cheek teeth ground it down. This feeding niche allowed them to coexist with much larger dinosaurs without direct competition. While Brachiosaurus reached for the sky, Stegosaurus cleared the ground. Together, they reshaped entire landscapes, keeping forests and plains open for new growth. Encounters with predators. Despite their armor, stegosaurs lived under constant threat. Allosaurus and other theropods prowled the same environments. Fossil trackways suggest that stegosaurs often moved in groups, perhaps using safety in numbers as an additional shield. A lone stegosaur was vulnerable, but a herd of spiked tails presented a wall of death no predator would charge lightly. The battles were brutal, and the evidence is carved into bone. Predator bite marks, healed wounds, and broken spikes all tell the same story. Life was a struggle of constant defense. Every day, stegosaurs had to hold the line against the relentless storm of predators. The symbol of defense over millions of years, stegosaurs evolved into several species across the world. From Stegosaurus ungulatus in North America to Kentrosaurus in Africa with even longer tail spikes. Each carried the same message: survival through armor and intimidation. Their design was so successful that it endured for tens of millions of years. Though they were never the fastest or smartest, stegosaurs thrived by perfecting defense to an art form, the legacy of fear. Today, When we look at the fossils of a stegosaur, it is tempting to see them as strange, even comical animals, giant reptiles, with odd plates and tiny brains. But in the Jurassic, they were anything but comical. They were fortresses on legs, respected by predators, feared by hunters, and remembered in bone scars that testify to their power. The legacy of the stegosaur is one of resilience. It teaches us that survival is not always about intelligence or aggression. Sometimes it is about endurance, intimidation, and the ability to make predators think twice. The plates may have been for display, the brain may have been small, but the spikes were real. And for millions of years they worked. Echoes of the fortress. When you stand before a stegosaur skeleton today, the spikes still jut outward, frozen in eternal warning. You can almost feel the tension of the muscles that once powered them. The swing of the tail that could crush bone and end a predator's hunt in a single strike. Stegosaurs were not gentle giants. They were guardians of the Jurassic fortresses of flesh and bone that defended themselves against the storm. And in their story, we see one of evolution's most powerful truths. Sometimes, the best way to survive is not to flee or to fight head-on, but to stand firm and make the enemy bleed. They were its architects. Their enormous appetites demanded hundreds of kilograms of food each day. By stripping entire trees bare and trampling the undergrowth, they reshaped forests and floodplains into open landscapes. Wherever sauropods roamed, they left behind clearings, trails, and feeding scars on tree trunks. Their dung fertilized the soil, spreading nutrients far and wide. In this way, they acted as ecological engineers, much like elephants do today, except on a scale that dwarfs imagination. The herds of titans evidence from fossil trackways shows that sauropods often traveled in groups. Imagine a herd of a dozen or more diplodocus, each one over 20 meters long, moving together across a plain. From a distance, they would have looked like a line of walking mountains, their necks swaying gently as they grazed on the treetops. This social behavior offered safety in numbers. While no predator could bring down an adult sauropod alone, a vulnerable juvenile was always at risk. By moving in herds, the adults shielded the young, their sheer size acting as a living wall against attack. Predators versus mountains. Could any predator truly challenge a full-grown sauropod? The answer is almost always no. Even the mighty Allosaurus would think twice before attacking a healthy adult. A single swing of a tail could shatter ribs. A stomp from a foot the size of a dinner table could crush bone instantly. But the young were another story. Fossil sites show the bones of juvenile sauropods with predator bite marks, evidence that Allosaurus and other theropods preyed on the weakest members of the herd. This eternal struggle, giant herbivores defending their young, predators circling like wolves, defined the balance of Jurassic life. The rhythm of giants. Living as a sauropod was not a fast-paced existence. These were creatures of patience and endurance. Each day was a slow march through forests and floodplains, feeding constantly to sustain their massive bodies. Their long necks allowed them to graze across wide swaths of vegetation without moving, sweeping in arcs like cranes over the canopy. Their movements were steady, deliberate, almost meditative. And yet, their presence changed everything. For smaller dinosaurs and early mammals, the rumbling footsteps of a sauropod herd were as powerful a force of nature as a storm or a flood. The mystery of their size. Why did sauropods grow so large? Scientists still debate the answer. Some argue it was a way to reach food high in the trees, avoiding competition with smaller herbivores. Others believe their size helped deter predators, or that their efficient lungs and lightweight bones simply allowed them to grow without limit. Whatever the cause, the result was the same. Sauropods became the most massive animals ever to walk the land, a level of gigantism unmatched even by the dinosaurs that came after. Echoes of awe. To stand near a sauropod even, in imagination, is to feel awe. Unlike the dread inspired by the giant arthropods of the Carboniferous, or the fear sparked by a predator's roar, sauropods stir something deeper. Reverence. They were too vast to fear in the usual sense. They were monuments of flesh and bone, living cathedrals that walked the earth. Their legacy lingers in every towering skeleton displayed in museums, in every fossil trackway that stretches across ancient stone. They remind us that life, given the right conditions, can push the boundaries of possibility until the impossible becomes real. Walking mountains, the sauropods were not predators. They were not armored warriors. They were not cunning hunters. And yet they dominated their world by sheer presence. For tens of millions of years, they reigned as Earth's walking mountains, shaping ecosystems, challenging predators, and inspiring awe that still echoes in us today. They remind us that survival can come not only from claws, armor, or speed, but from patience, endurance, and the quiet power of size. When you picture them neck stretched toward the sky, tail trailing like a whip, each step shaking the ground, remember this. You are imagining the closest thing Earth has ever known to living mountains. Seeded the stage. Most giant reptiles were cold-blooded or poorly adapted to the cooler, dim hours. Predators like Allosaurus slept or slowed their activity once the sun disappeared. But mammals, with their warm bodies and sharp senses, came alive. Their eyes adapted to low light, their noses detected prey hidden in soil, their ears picked up the faint rustle of insects in the grass. Night became their sanctuary, the realm where giants slept and small creatures could feed in relative safety. It was in these hours that mammals carved out their ecological niche, learning to live in the shadows and survive in a world that otherwise had no room for them. Diet and diversity fossil evidence shows that Jurassic mammals were surprisingly diverse. Some were insectivores, darting after beetles and grubs with quick, precise bites. Others were omnivores, nibbling on seeds, roots, and small vertebrates. A few even experimented with gliding membranes or semi-aquatic lifestyles, hinting at the adaptability that would one day let mammals conquer every environment on Earth. They were not large; most would fit comfortably in your hand. But their variety reveals a simple truth. Even in an age of giants, smallness could be an advantage. Living with giants. For every moment of opportunity, there was also danger. A scurrying mammal could fall prey to a hungry raptor, a passing crocodile, or even a careless step from a sauropod's massive foot. Fossils sometimes show mammal bones inside the stomachs of small theropods, evidence that these little creatures were easy prey. And yet mammals endured. They bred quickly, hid effectively, and used their senses to stay one step ahead. Their strategy was not to dominate, but to persist. While giants battled for supremacy above, mammals dug burrows, climbed trees, slipped through shadows, always surviving, always waiting. Intelligence in miniature, though small, mammals possessed something none of the dinosaurs did: a different kind of brain. Larger for their body size, their brains allowed for more complex behavior, sharper instincts, and greater adaptability. Imagine a mother mammal teaching her young how to forage, guiding them to a patch of insects hidden beneath rotting wood. Imagine one of these tiny creatures carefully avoiding the scent trails of predators, memorizing safe paths through the forest. These behaviors may sound modest compared to the thunderous drama of dinosaurs, but they were the seeds of something far more profound: intelligence. The power of patience. The mammals of the Jurassic were not destined to rise immediately. For millions of years they remained background players, overlooked by the titans around them. But this obscurity was their shield. While the dinosaurs grew larger, louder, and more specialized, mammals refined the art of survival, adapting, experimenting, and persisting through every challenge. They were not rulers, but survivors. And sometimes, survival is the most powerful strategy of all, the spark of the future. It is easy to dismiss these small mammals as insignificant compared to the towering sauropods or fierce theropods. But in truth, they carried the future within them. Every mammal alive today, bats, whales, tigers, humans, traces its lineage back to these tiny survivors of the Jurassic night. Their world was one of shadows, danger, and constant vigilance. And yet, their persistence ensured that when the age of dinosaurs finally ended, they would be ready to inherit the Earth. Legacy of the shadows. To imagine the Jurassic is to imagine titans, but it is also to imagine whispers. The quiet rustle in the undergrowth, the flicker of eyes reflecting moonlight, the warmth of fur pressed against damp soil, and a hidden burrow. These were the mammals, small, clever, and resilient. They remind us that history is not only written by the giants who dominate their time, but also by the survivors who endure long enough to see the giants fall. In the great story of life, the mammals of the Jurassic played a quiet but essential role. They were not the stars of their age, but they were the promise of what was to come. Not unlike modern lions, coordinated attack could harass a sauropod from multiple angles, targeting the young, old, or injured. Even if not strictly social, these predators may have tolerated one another during a hunt, drawn together by opportunity. Imagine the scene. A herd of sauropods drinks at a riverbank. Shadows move at the tree line. Then, with startling speed, the hunters emerge. Allosaurus sprints forward, jaws wide, teeth flashing in the sun. Panic ripples through the herd. Juvenile sauropod stumbles, and in moments the pack closes in. Dust rises. The predator's strategy is not elegance. It is persistence, speed, and brutality. The Stegosaurus duel, not all prey was defenseless. Stegosaurus, with its plates and massive tail spikes, the Thagomizer, was a formidable opponent. Fossil evidence shows bite marks from Allosaurus on Stegosaurus, and puncture wounds on Allosaurus bones that match the spikes of their armored prey. This tells us of battles fought millions of years ago, an Allosaurus lunging forward, jaws clamping down on a Stegosaurus flank, only to be met with a swing of the tail. Like 4 spikes, each as long as a man's arm, whistled through the air with deadly force. Sometimes the predator won. Other times it limped away with wounds that might never heal. Masters of adaptation. What gave Allosaurus its edge was not just its size or teeth, but its adaptations. Its eyes faced slightly forward, giving it better depth perception. Its arms, though shorter than its body, were strong and clawed, able to grip and slash prey. Its legs were built for speed, not long chases, but short, devastating bursts. And then there was its brain. While not large by mammal standards, it was sophisticated enough to coordinate attacks, gauge prey movement, and adapt strategies. In the Jurassic, brute strength alone was not enough. Precision mattered, and Allosaurus had evolved the tools to deliver it. The apex predators shape ecosystems. By hunting herbivores, they kept populations in balance. By preying on the weak or sick, they indirectly strengthened herds. Their presence maintained order in an age that otherwise teetered on chaos. The fossils of the Morrison Formation tell this story in layers of bone. Tooth marks on sauropod ribs, shattered bones of stegosaurs, and even the remains of young Allosaurus cannibalized by their own kind. These predators ruled not only through dominance of others, but sometimes through brutal competition among themselves. The terror of the Jurassic, to walk the floodplains of the late Jurassic, was to live under the constant shadow of hunters like Allosaurus. For the mammals hiding in burrows, it was the tremor of footsteps overhead. For the stegosaurs grazing, it was the ever-present risk of ambush. For the sauropods, it was the knowledge that even their towering size could not make them invincible. Allosaurus was not the largest predator of Earth's history. It was not the strongest, nor the smartest. But in its world, it was enough. It was the apex predator that defined the Jurassica, reminder that power does not need to be absolute, only relative to the world in which it exists. A legacy of predators, though long extinct, Allosaurus has left an enduring mark. Its bones tell us of speed and savagery, of survival through violence, of ecosystems held in balance by the presence of a relentless hunter. When we picture the Jurassic, it is not only the long-necked sauropods or armored stegosaurs that define it, but also the predator that stalked them, a shadow of teeth and claws. An echo of pursuit, the terror that turned the Jurassic into an age not just of giants but of hunters, meters in length, accounting for half the animal's body. Their tiny heads, filled with sharp teeth, looked almost too small to be dangerous, but they were efficient ambush hunters. Plesiosaurs used their long, flexible necks to snake silently through the water. Hiding their bulky bodies at a distance, they thrust their heads into schools of fish or ammonites, snapping up prey before it could scatter. Therefore, massive flippers, shaped like paddles, gave them an elegant, almost bird-like flight through the water. Unlike sharks, they could move in any direction with ease, darting upward, downward, or sideways with graceful precision. To see a plesiosaur glide past would be like watching a myth come alive, serpent fused with a turtle, moving through the ocean with silent menace. The pliosaurs, The apex ocean predators, if the long-necked plesiosaurs were strange, their cousins, the pliosaurs, were terrifying. Shorter necks, massive skulls, and jaws that could rival the bite force of T-Rex. These were the true apex predators of the Jurassic seas. The most famous Liopleurodon could reach lengths of 6 to 7 meters. Though some fossil fragments suggest giants over 15 meters long may have existed, with 4 enormous flippers powering its bulk, it was not only strong but surprisingly agile. Its teeth, long and conical, were designed to pierce flesh and hold on to struggling prey, be it fish, other reptiles, or even rival pliosaurs. Imagine being in a Jurassic sea. You hear nothing but the muffled silence of water. Then suddenly, the gloom is split by a massive shadow. A skull the size of a car glides into view, jaws opening wide. The pliosaur does not chase. It ambushes. It strikes from the darkness with overwhelming force, dragging its victim into the abyss. For ammonites, ichthyosaurs, and plesiosaurs, this was the hunter to fear, the tyrant of the oceans. The ammonites. The endless prey, but what fueled these predators? Much of it came from the ammonites, spiral-shelled mollusks related to squid and octopus. In the Jurassic seas, ammonites were everywhere. Their shells litter fossil beds across the world, evidence of their abundance. They filled every niche, small ones darting in schools, larger ones drifting like armored balloons. Their coiled shells offered some protection, but not enough. Ichthyosaurs cracked them open with precision. Pliosaurs crushed them with brute force. Even fish gnawed at them relentlessly. Ammonites were the foundation of the Jurassic ocean food chain, the prey that made giants possible. Their abundance ensured predators could thrive, and their extinction millions of years later would reshape the seas forever. A symphony of predators, the Jurassic seas were not a place of safety. Every level of the water column was patrolled. Near the surface, ichthyosaurs flashed like silver arrows. In the middle depths, plesiosaurs snaked silently, their long necks striking without warning. In the shadows below, pliosaurs loomed, patient, unstoppable hunters. Even smaller creatures, like marine crocodiles, joined the hunt, their sleek bodies darting between giants. Sharks, too, were present, though in the Jurassic they had not yet risen to dominance. It was an ocean alive with pursuit and death, a place where the water itself seemed filled with teeth. The ocean versus the land. On land, Allosaurus ruled the floodplains, but the seas were different. Here, dominance was not about towering over prey, but about mastering three-dimensional space. Every predator needed speed, maneuverability, and timing, and the competition was relentless. In the Jurassic, the oceans were not a backdrop. They were arenas of survival as brutal and dramatic as any savanna, and their hunters were among the most efficient killers the planet has ever seen. The forgotten rulers of the waves today, the ichthyosaurs, plesiosaurs, and pliosaurs, are gone. Only their fossils remain, bones etched in stone, ammonite shells spiraled like eternal clocks. They are often overshadowed in popular memory by dinosaurs, yet in their time, they were every bit as dominant. When we imagine the Jurassic, we should not think only of long-necked sauropods grazing beneath towering conifers or predators like Allosaurus prowling the floodplains. We should also picture the oceans, dark, endless, alive with hunters whose shapes seemed both alien and familiar. The seas of the Jurassic remind us of a truth that echoes across all of Earth's history. Dominance does not belong to one form of life alone. Whether on land or in the water, nature always finds new rulers, new hunters, new terrors. Sea. They soared high, scanning the waters below for fish. With sudden dives they plunged, their jaws snapping shut around slippery prey before climbing back into the air with effortless grace. Some had long, needle-like teeth for gripping fish. Others had broad, crushing jaws for breaking shells. Their hunting styles were as varied as the seas themselves. But not all were fishers. Some pterosaurs may have hunted small dinosaurs or scavenged carcasses, swooping down to steal scraps from larger predators. Others fed on insects and swarms, their sharp reflexes making them the terror of smaller airborne life. The Jurassic sky was not gentle, it was a battlefield of wings, flight, and power. To understand the true dominance of pterosaurs, we must grasp how difficult flight is. To rise into the air, requires immense power and delicate balance. Birds today achieve this with lightweight bones and feathers. Pterosaurs achieved it with hollow skeletons, powerful chest muscles, and wings reinforced with fibers, called actinofibrils. Their launch was unique. Unlike birds, which leap from their hind legs, pterosaurs vaulted into the sky using all four limbs. With a single leap, they hurled themselves upward, their wings snapping wide, catching the air in an instant. It was a system so efficient that even the largest species could take flight without needing cliffs or running starts. This mastery of launch made them unmatched in their time. No other creatures rivaled their ability to command the skies, the role of the skies on land. Sauropods browsed in forests. In the seas, pliosaurs hunted with crushing jaws. But above it all, the pterosaurs reigned. Their presence shaped ecosystems. Predators below had to contend not only with rivals on the ground, but also with sharp-eyed flyers circling overhead, ready to steal a meal. Prey animals could never forget that danger came from above, as well as from the shadows of the forest floor. The skies of the Jurassic were not empty. They were arenas of survival where wings dictated fate, and fossils of shadows. Today, the fossils of pterosaurs are rare treasures. Their bones were fragile, hollow, and easily destroyed. Yet in exceptional deposits we find them. Delicate skeletons with wings preserved in stone. Tails still tipped with their strange veins, jaws lined with teeth sharp as needles. In these fossils, we glimpse shadows of skies that once roared with life. They remind us that flight was not always the domain of birds. For over 150 million years, pterosaurs were the lords of the air, unmatched, unchallenged, and endlessly inventive in their designs. The forgotten rulers above, when people imagine prehistoric life, they often leap to dinosaurs or the marine reptiles of the deep. Yet pterosaurs deserve a place beside them, for they were not mere side characters. They were innovators, rewriting the rules of evolution by conquering the skies before anyone else dared. To look up in the Jurassic was to see more than clouds, was to see a ceiling alive with wings, great silhouettes drifting on thermals, sudden dives toward the ocean, piercing cries echoing across the cliffs. They were the forgotten rulers above, as strange and as fearsome as any predator of the land or sea, sharper tools to bring them down, or at least to feed on the weak and the young. This dynamic of giant plant-eaters and formidable hunters would define the Jurassic balance of power. Forests of the Jurassic, the land was cloaked in lush greenery. Conifer forests spread across valleys, their needles whispering in the wind. Beneath them grew ferns, cycads, and horsetails, forming a carpet of green that stretched for miles. These forests were not silent. Insects buzzed, pterosaurs swooped, and herds of dinosaurs moved like living storms through the undergrowth. Each plant was part of a cycle feeding the giants, fueling the fires of herbivory that powered the entire ecosystem. The vegetation of the Middle Jurassic laid the foundation for the later explosion of dinosaur diversity. Oceans in flux. While land was dominated by dinosaurs, the oceans were no less dynamic. Plesiosaurs glided through the water with long necks and paddle-like limbs, snatching fish with lightning speed. Ichthyosaurs, dolphin-shaped reptiles, hunted deeper waters, their eyes enormous for seeing in the gloom. Ammonites spiraled in vast numbers, their shells glittering beneath the waves, while marine crocodiles like Metriorhynchus began to adapt fully to life at sea. These were not awkward shoreline dwellers. They were streamlined, finned predators, chasing prey through open waters. The oceans of the Middle Jurassic were crucibles of experimentation. With life constantly reshaping itself to survive the shifting tides, flight evolves. Above, the skies were still commanded by pterosaurs. But the Middle Jurassic saw the first glimmers of something new: true birds. Fossils hint that feathered dinosaurs were already experimenting with flight. While Archaeopteryx would not appear until the late Jurassic, the roots of avian flight were already being planted. Feathers that began as insulation or display were now being refined into tools for gliding, leaping, and eventually powered flight. The air of the Middle Jurassic was alive with possibility. A web of interactions, the true hallmark of this age, was complexity. Ecosystems were not dominated by a single type of creature, but by interwoven webs of species. Sauropods fed on forests, Predators followed herds, smaller dinosaurs scavenged the remains. Insects swarmed in the undergrowth, and flying reptiles patrolled above. Every action created a ripple. The fall of a single giant tree might open sunlight for new plants, which would feed smaller herbivores, which in turn would attract predators. The Middle Jurassic was a living laboratory, where balance and instability danced side by side. The stage set for greatness, though it often seems like a quieter chapter, the Middle Jurassic was in truth a turning point. It established the ecological foundations for the golden age of dinosaurs that would follow in the late Jurassic and Cretaceous. Sauropods learned to grow enormous. Theropods honed their predatory skills. Pterosaurs diversified. Birds began their long journey toward the skies. The seas filled with sleek hunters and glittering prey. Everything that defined the later Jurassic world, the great herds, the towering predators, the soaring flyers, was seated here. The Middle Jurassic was the moment when dinosaurs did not simply survive. They became the architects of Earth's ecosystems. And once they claimed that role, they would not relinquish it for over 100 million years, opportunistic feeding on the same kills. Even if they did not bring down the largest adults, juvenile sauropods or weakened individuals offered chances for a meal. In this world of giants, Allosaurus was bold enough to take risks, striking against prey that seemed impossible. Allosaurus dominates the fossil record of the late Jurassic. It was not alone. Rival predators stalked the same landscapes. Ceratosaurus, with its distinctive nasal horn, was smaller but heavily built. It may have been a more ambush-focused hunter slipping through riverside forests and striking from cover. Its teeth were blade-like and narrow, ideal for slicing flesh quickly before retreating. Another rival, Torvosaurus, was even more formidable. Larger and heavier than Allosaurus, it could grow to lengths of nearly 35 feet. Fossil evidence suggests it was among the most powerful predators of the Jurassic, with massive jaws that rivaled the future tyrannosaurs. While Allosaurus relied on agility and technique, Torvosaurus relied on sheer power. These predators did not live in isolation. Their ranges overlapped, and the competition between them may have been fierce. Each species carved its own niche, some ambushing near rivers, others roaming open floodplains, and still others targeting different prey. Strategies of survival in this world. Survival was never guaranteed. The life of an apex predator was brutal. Injuries were common, and fossil bones of Allosaurus show healed fractures and bite marks. Hunting herds of sauropods carried immense risk. A single swipe of a giant's tail could shatter bones. Even stegosaurs, with their plated armor and spiked tails, posed deadly challenges. Paleontologists have found Allosaurus bones scarred by impacts from stegosaurs' weapons, proof of encounters that ended painfully. But predators evolved to match their prey. The strong neck, flexible jaws, and quick legs of Allosaurus were not accidents. They were solutions, honed by millions of years of evolutionary pressure, to the problem of surviving in a land of giants. The ecological web, these predators were not just hunters, they were regulators of the ecosystem. By preying on the weak, the young, and the sick, they shaped the dynamics of herds. They kept populations in check, preventing overgrazing and ensuring forests could regrow. The carcasses they left behind fed scavengers, small theropods, pterosaurs, and even early mammals. Nothing went to waste in the Jurassic. Every death fueled new life, a cycle that predators like Allosaurus made possible. The legacy of the apex predators, the reign of Allosaurus and its rivals, would not last forever. In time, ecosystems shifted, new continents drifted apart, and new predators rose to take their place. But in the late Jurassic, they were kings. Their dominance was not measured just in size, but in adaptability. They hunted in forests, floodplains, and river valleys. They fed on giants, armored prey, and smaller dinosaurs alike. When people imagine dinosaurs, it is often the predators that come first to mind: teeth, claws, and the thrill of the hunt. But behind that image lies a deeper truth. Apex predators are not just killers. They are architects of ecosystems, shaping the flow of life around them. Allosaurus and its rivals remind us that even in a world filled with giants, it was often the hunters in the shadows who defined the rhythm of survival. The late Jurassic was their kingdom. and every roar that echoed through its forests was a reminder that life, in every age, is balanced on the edge between predator and prey. Its long, slender neck allowed it to sweep wide arcs through forests, stripping leaves from low to mid-level vegetation. Unlike other sauropods that browsed high in the canopy, Diplodocus specialized in clearing the understory, feeding on ferns, cycads, and conifers. In this way, it avoided competition with taller feeders like Brachiosaurus, creating a natural division of resources. Despite its massive size, Diplodocus may have traveled in herds, moving together across the floodplains. Fossil trackways suggest coordinated movement, with young individuals sheltered in the center while adults guarded the flanks. For predators, this was a formidable sight. Attacking a herd of Diplodocus was to risk a storm of lashing tails, each capable of breaking bones with a single strike. Brachiosaurus. The towering browser. If Diplodocus ruled the ground level, Brachiosaurus ruled the skies. Unlike most sauropods, Brachiosaurus carried its neck high, angled upward like a living giraffe. At lengths over 80 feet and standing nearly 40 feet tall, it could browse at heights no other dinosaur could reach. Trees that towered above the reach of other herbivores became its exclusive buffet. Its front legs were longer than its hind legs, giving it a distinctive posture with a steeply inclined back. This design, combined with an immense neck, made Brachiosaurus one of the greatest high browsers in Earth's history. With every mouthful of conifer needles and ginkgo leaves, it reshaped forests, pruning them from the top down. The energy demands of such a creature were staggering. Some scientists estimate that a single Brachiosaurus may have consumed over 800 pounds of vegetation in a single day. To fuel such a lifestyle, it likely spent nearly every waking moment feeding, moving slowly across the floodplains with the patience of an animal that had no real threats once it reached adulthood. Engineering giants. How did creatures so massive survive? The answer lies in evolutionary engineering. Sauropods had hollow bones, reducing weight without sacrificing strength. Their lungs were adapted for efficient airflow, similar to modern birds, allowing them to take in huge volumes of oxygen. Their long necks, far from being a burden, acted like feeding cranes, letting them reach vast areas of vegetation without moving their heavy bodies. Their size itself was a defense. A predator like Allosaurus might harass a juvenile or a weakened adult, but a full-grown Brachiosaurus was effectively invincible. Its sheer bulk was deterrent enough. And in the rare event of an attack, herds could rally, using tails, trampling feet, and sheer numbers to defend themselves. The ecosystem of titans, the presence of sauropods, transformed the environment. By consuming vast quantities of plants, they shaped the growth of forests. They created open pathways through dense vegetation, corridors that other animals used for travel. Their dung fertilized the soil, spreading nutrients that fed new growth. Every step of these giants was part of an ecological cycle. Where they walked, landscapes changed. Where they fed, forests were pruned. Where they died, their massive carcasses became feasts for predators, scavengers, and even insects. The late Jurassic was not simply an age of giants. It was an age built by them. Awe and mystery today. When people imagine dinosaurs, it is often the sauropods that inspired the deepest awe. The sight of a skeleton in a museum, its neck stretching impossibly high, its body longer than a city bus, reminds us of a world where nature pushed the limits of possibility. Yet these animals are also shrouded in mystery. How fast did they grow? How did they mate? How did they coordinate in herds? These questions remain open, clues buried in stone and bone, waiting for future discoveries. What is clear is that their size was not a curse, but the secret to their survival. They lived for millions of years, longer than many other groups of dinosaurs, and their presence defined the Jurassic world. The Age of Titans, the late Jurassic, was the pinnacle of sauropod dominance. Diplodocus with its whip-like tail, Brachiosaurus with its towering neck, and countless other giants, like Camarasaurus and Apatosaurus, created a living architecture of power and grace. They were not predators, but they were not passive either. Their size gave them authority, their herds created safety, and their existence turned the land into a kingdom of titans. In this world, predators like Allosaurus were dangerous, but they were not rulers. The true rulers were the plant-eating giants who shaped the land itself. Their reign would continue for millions of years until the shifting continents, changing climates, and new predators of the Cretaceous rewrote the rules once again. For now, in the story of Earth's history, the late Jurassic belongs to them, the titans who stretched their necks to the skies and ruled the land not through fear, but through sheer immensity. The Carboniferous world, with all its terrors and its monsters, was not simply a wilderness gone wild. It was a stage carefully arranged by forces smaller and quieter than any dragonfly, scorpion, or millipede. Beneath the roar of wings and the scrape of armored legs, the true architects of this age were not predators, but plants. Towering club mosses, giant horsetails, and tree ferns did more than cloak the swamps in endless green. They transformed the very chemistry of the planet. Each spore they released, each leaf that fell and rotted into the swamp floor, pulled carbon dioxide from the air and replaced it with oxygen. Over millions of years, these silent engineers created an atmosphere heavy enough to grow monsters. Every spider's web, every dragonfly's hum, every amphibian's cautious step was possible because the plants were rewriting the sky itself, were feeding the fire of gigantism without ever intending to. But there was a paradox in this abundance. The same vast forests that gave the arthropods their reign also set the stage for their downfall. As the plants buried more and more carbon deep underground, the balance began to tip. The very system that produced oxygen-rich air was creating a trap. The world was being loaded with fuel, not just wood and leaves above ground, but layers upon layers of peat beneath it. These swamps were not only nurseries of life, they were time bombs of energy waiting to be released. And in that hidden tension lay the seeds of collapse. Imagine walking through one of these forests. You see the towering trees with their scaly trunks, the endless mats of moss spreading across the swamp floor. You breathe the heavy oxygen, unaware that every breath is part of a fragile equation. To you, the forest feels eternal, indestructible. Yet beneath your feet, each layer of rotting plant matter is slowly stacking a geological record, a storehouse of carbon that one day will become coal. And when the rhythm of fire returns, when lightning cracks the sky and ignites this green empire, the blaze will not just consume trees, it will consume the balance of the entire planet. The giants of the Carboniferous ruled in numbers, in size, and sheer dominance, but they were not the masters of their fate. The true master was the atmosphere, and the atmosphere was being rewritten by forests that had no mind, no will, and no mercy. This is the haunting truth. The monsters of the Carboniferous were living in a world built on borrowed time. For millions of years, the Carboniferous forests thrived, pumping oxygen into the air, creating swamps so vast they seemed endless. But nothing in Earth's history lasts forever. Slowly, almost invisibly at first, the balance began to shift. The signs were subtle. Few forests withered and did not regrow as quickly. Swamps that had once sprawled endlessly began to dry, their waters retreating into sluggish streams. The air, once heavy with oxygen, started to thin. To the creatures of that time, these changes were not noticed in days or even lifetimes. They unfolded over thousands of years, quiet enough that no giant dragonfly or scorpion could sense what was happening. But in the slow rhythm of geology, disaster was already on its way. The problem was simple and devastating. The forests had been too successful. They had pulled vast amounts of carbon dioxide from the atmosphere, locking it away in thick beds of peat. With less carbon dioxide to trap the sun's warmth, the planet began to cool. Glaciers crept across southern continents, and climates shifted. Swamps dried, forests faltered. The engine that had built the monsters sputtered and began to fail. The atmosphere changed. Oxygen levels dropped, falling from their extraordinary peak toward something closer to what we breathe today. For us, that would be a relief. But for the arthropods of the Carboniferous, it was a death sentence. Their enormous bodies depended on oxygen-rich air. As the levels fell, breathing became harder, tissues starved, muscles weakened. The once invincible giants began to suffocate in their own world. Picture it. A dragonfly with wings as wide as a hawk struggles to lift itself into the air, its strength failing in the thinning atmosphere. A centipede longer than a man moves sluggishly across the forest floor, its once relentless rhythm slowing as its body can no longer sustain the weight of so many legs. These were not isolated tragedies. They were the beginning of the end. And as the forests themselves collapsed, so too did the monsters they had created. The age of arthropod dominance was unraveling. The reign of the giants was ending, not with a single blow, but with the slow suffocation of a planet resetting its balance. The forests that had once towered like living cathedrals began to wither. Tree ferns, giant club mosses, and horsetails that had stretched 100 feet into the air collapsed into decay. The swamps that had stretched across continents dried into patches of cracked earth and shrinking pools. Where once the air was thick with the hum of insects and the hiss of countless legs, silence began to creep in. This collapse was not sudden. It was a slow unraveling, one that lasted hundreds of thousands of years. Yet for the creatures that lived through it, the change was absolute. Whole ecosystems that had depended on swampy forests vanished. Amphibians that had once thrived in the wet, humid world now found themselves without shelter, their eggs exposed, their bodies drying in the shifting climate. The arthropods, so long the masters of land, suffered most of all. Their massive bodies were built for a different atmosphere. As oxygen levels fell, their sheer size became their undoing. A dragonfly with wings like a hawk could no longer draw enough air through its tracheal tubes. Its flight slowed, became erratic, and finally stopped. Giant centipedes that had once dominated the undergrowth collapsed under their own weight, their tissues starved of oxygen. The world that had created them was gone, and with it, their reign. Fires, once a rhythm of destruction and renewal, now burned forests that never returned. Charcoal deposits tell us that the earth was alive with flame during these final days of the Carboniferous. But when the flames passed, the swamps did not regrow. Instead, barren stretches spread across the land. The endless green labyrinth shrank into isolated patches, and the monsters that depended on it dwindled with it. For the first time in tens of millions of years, the forest floor began to feel empty. The soundscape of the Carboniferous, the constant scraping, buzzing, and clicking, grew thinner. The giant arthropods that had once filled every shadow were fading. But this collapse did not mean the end of life. It meant a transformation. While the giants fell, smaller creatures found new opportunities. The very devastation that toppled the rulers of the Carboniferous was clearing space for new rulers to rise. The age of monsters was ending. And in the silence that followed, the age of reptiles began to stir. One that would one day lead to creatures far larger and more powerful than even the most fearsome scorpion or dragonfly. The forests had burned. The atmosphere had changed. The giants had fallen. And now, in the ashes of collapse, the world was being prepared for its next rulers. The Carboniferous was ending, and the stage was set for the rise of the dinosaurs. The Carboniferous had been a world of excess. Oxygen thickened the air. Forests stretched across continents. Arthropods grew to monstrous size and claimed every shadow, every branch, every breath of land. For millions of years, survival meant living in their suffocating dominion. But no age lasts forever. The forests fell, fires raged, the atmosphere shifted, and the giants, once unshakable rulers of the land, dwindled into silence. What remained were not the monsters of nightmare, but their smaller descendants. Dragonflies no bigger than your hand. Centipedes hiding in damp soil. Spiders weaving webs in quiet corners. Shadows of giants, reminders of a world that no longer exists. From the ruins, reptiles emerged. Fragile at first, but carrying within them an extraordinary gift. Independence from water, protection within their eggs, and skin strong enough to endure the drying air. These humble creatures would inherit the land, shaping it into the stage for an entirely new drama. Their descendants would become the rulers of the Mesozoic, the dinosaurs who still capture our imagination today. And yet, the legacy of the Carboniferous never fully disappeared. You can feel it in the instinctive shiver at the skitter of a centipede, in the sudden unease when a spider crosses your path, in the way the low buzz of wings can unsettle us more than the roar of a lion. These are echoes of an age when insects were not nuisances, but nightmares. The Carboniferous was the only time in Earth's history when water was safer than land. It's the only moment when the monsters ruled, not from the oceans, but from the forests, the swamps, and the very air itself. It was an age that shaped our fears, carved instincts into our bones, and left behind fossils that still whisper of a forgotten nightmare. An age when the land itself was a trap. An age when giants with too many legs and too many eyes ruled every shadow. And though they are gone, their memory lingers, in every spider's web, in every skittering shadow. In every buzz of wings too close to your ear, the Carboniferous still breathes. A reminder that Earth has not always been ours, that once, long before dinosaurs, long before mammals, this planet belonged to monsters.